All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For only the second time in the history of this channel, I have a full band joining me for an interview. It's my pleasure to welcome, originally from the great state of New Jersey, the fellows in Bad Karma. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
There we go.
All
So
right.
we've got Doug, Tom, and Wally. For those who have followed my channel, you know perhaps a little bit about Bad Karma. This was a band formed in the early 80s, went on until roughly
Late 80s, but that's okay.
Late 80s.
Yeah, like 88 is when we really started. 87, I think, is when we really started, and then we started playing out in 88. First gig was in 88.
and it was kind of roughly 10 years the first go around, right? When all was said and done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. And Doug has been on the show before. Doug, of course, was from Pleased Youth as well and Lunar Bear Ensemble. Tom was also a member of Lunar Bear Ensemble. I've had John.
Wally played too. Wally was played percussion, I think, right? In like one of those
Yes, he
gigs, I
did.
believe at the knitting factory when knitting factory was on Houston Street in New York.
Mhm. That was one of the last gigs of that iteration of that project.
Yep.
Wally did indeed. He had the timbales.
There we go.
Excellent. Of course, Wally, we'll get into this as well. You've had a pretty extensive life as a drummer, including a stint playing percussion in Brian Brain with a mutual friend of all of ours, Martin Atkins. So the world is very small. The more I dive into these Jersey interviews, the more I realize we're all kind of connected in some way. Because I played with Martin as well, on and off for 18 years, so
Yep.
there's a lot of shared history there. But and there's a lot of history with this band, Bad Karma, but I want to get into the here and now first and foremost, because that's always the most important period of time. There's going to be a Bad Karma reunion show coming up May 16th at Randy Now's Man Cave down in Hightstown, New Jersey. So let's start there. The big question being, why now? What led to a Bad Karma reunion in 2025?
Oh,
Well, I mean, I basically said, what's you guys want to play? They're like, yeah, we'll play. So that was good. I mean, Wally's kind of newly retired from the U.S. government. So because of his retirement, he's got some open time left, and I was like, man, it'd be nice to see everybody again. So, I just happened to I booked a gig there already because I'm doing that Slugger thing that I'm doing, and I was like, why don't we just play that gig and then, we can headline it and do the gig. And then I don't have to have the pressure of getting as much shit together for that. And it ended up working out pretty well so far. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a really good show. I think we're going to do really well. I think, we're going to get one run through beforehand, but that should be more than sufficient for the stuff we picked. We already have a set list set up, so we're not going too crazy, and it's not too deep a dive, but it's going to be good. And I think the last time we played was that gig that where Bruce Springsteen showed up. That was probably the last gig I think we actually played.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Asbury Park. Yeah, the Bolorama, is that what it's called?
The
Asbury Lanes.
Asbury
Asbury Lanes.
Bolorama. Nice. Yeah, that was the last time we really played, and I think, well, I don't know what year that was, man. I think it might have been like, I don't know.
Didn't we play for after that for the memorial for not the memorial, but the support of the Court Tavern when Patti Smith played?
That might have been it. I have that poster behind me. It even has a year on it. Where the hell did that poster go? Oh, it's
It's
right in
okay.
front. It's right in front of me. There we go. 2010. That's probably the last time I played. So it's been, 15 years.
Mm.
That was the last time. You're right. I think that was. I don't think we played. I don't think we played the lanes after. I don't think that was after that. So yeah. I mean, then there was also the Hurricane show, which was we were playing and it ended up happening. There was a hurricane, and they're just like he had to cancel a gig because it was just like I think that was Sandy. We had a gig, and that didn't work out because it was like a hurricane was blowing through. So yeah, that was a whole other thing.
So, Doug, I know you're down in Florida. Wally, you're still in Jersey, correct?
I'm in Maryland.
Oh, you're in
And
Maryland.
I moved there in '98.
Okay, excellent. Tom, are you still down in Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Great.
I live like a mile from New Brunswick.
The town of Mill.
Excellent. And I suspect most of the people who'd be watching this particular interview know of you guys or just know you in general. But for the subscribers and regular viewers who dive into these videos to learn more about the greater history, you guys as a band sprung out of that New Brunswick scene, which I've chronicled a lot on this channel. As I said, Doug was in Pleased Youth. There was also this incredible band. Uh, 87, 88-ish called Lunar Bear Ensemble. I've had John Luna Ritchie on the show. Martin was playing in that band at the time because Martin had moved out to Jersey for a couple of years, and there's a whole separate interview with Martin about that era. So, you guys have kind of been bouncing into each other quite a bit. But before we get into the bad karma thing, I know, Tom, you have some other commitments. So I want to kind of get into it with you first. Um, obviously you've been playing for a long time. When was kind of your entry point into A, playing music to begin with, and B, kind of becoming involved in that New Brunswick scene of the era?
For me playing, I mean, I just, I was Tom from Belmar, going to the Belmar Cinema to see A Hard Day's Night when I was 10 years old. Like that was it. I saw that, and I just started to really love music. And I mean, it's a pretty. I guess I mean, millions of people have probably said the same kind of thing through time. They saw the Beatles. I mean, that was a definitely starting point for me. They still, are they still ring in my ears, along with all kinds of music. I got pretty obsessed about it, and eventually got an instrument. I wanted to play the bass. I liked the sound of it, and that was basically my entry point, I guess. And then as you get into high school, like the Jersey Shore was kind of weird because there really wasn't an original music scene per se down there at the time. Like, I mean, there was the Asbury Park, Bruce Springsteen era type stuff, but that was kind of before my time. I mean, by the time I was going out, I mean, it was all, bar bands and cover bands and things like that. And I was in a couple of those. But, once I went to college, I started my head exploded. And then once I heard Black Flag and the Minutemen, that was kind of a turning point for me. I know the Minutemen, just that and Husker Du, it was kind of a weird triumvirate of sound. I liked all the classic stuff, but I heard all that American music, and it was really exciting. I mean, we had a whole little crew of people the last couple of years in high school that were, like fringers. I guess you would call them today. We just love that stuff, and eventually, going to college, we find a lot of like-minded people. I started playing in some early experimental type bands. I played in this funny band called the Existential Moped, which is pretty hilarious. There was actually a guy from Monster Magnet in that band. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, just meeting people and experimenting, and it was just it was a whole new world. But I was just lucky that I don't know how it happened, but John Ritchie must have seen me play down there because he was from Manasquan, which is kind of the same area as Belmar, not really too far. So I don't know if he was visiting or what he was doing, but he got my phone number. I still don't know how it happened. It might have been Richard Graham too, because he was from, I think, Wall Township or Spring Lake Heights or something. So they called me, and by that time I was just like my last year of college, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to audition for this Lunar Bear. So I said, well, yeah, because I saw John do a poetry reading at Monmouth University, which is where I went to college. And So I knew him. I mean, I just didn't know how he got my number, but I did the audition. That's where I met Martin and Eddie Freeze from Crossfire Choir, who I had seen play in New Brunswick when, driving up, because I'd driven up a few times to see shows. I saw Doug before I knew him open up for the Butthole Surfers at the Court Tavern. So, it was just weird, like, because Doug was there and Martin and Eddie Freeze. And I was like, ooh, what the heck is this?
And 20 other people.
Well, Todd Chafee, remember, he was there. And
a lot of guys. That guy from Twig was there. I mean, it was like John's idea. John's idea.
There was another bass player. There was another guy playing bass. And, I remember it was great playing with Martin. I wasn't like a pill aficionado. I loved Second Edition and the, that first album a lot. But I wasn't like a slave to it. I liked it, but it was a trip. I couldn't believe he was sitting behind a drum set. That was a weird day. I just left there. My head was spinning. And I got a call from John. He wanted me to play in a group. Never rest. That's a lot of stuff happened to me because of John Ritchie, who I have nothing but infinite respect and admiration for. He is a mensch in every sense of the word as far as art and music. He's just a super creative guy. He's got a great ear, and especially for a guy who doesn't play a musical instrument, he's pretty amazing. But yeah, I met, I met Doug and Wally both kind of through those connections. So it was cool meeting Wally and Doug, especially Wally, because he kind of had a first connection to the, like that first wave of New Brunswick bands, like the, DB and the Grays and Crossfire Choir, Doug, Bricks Mortar and all that stuff. Like Wally was playing in the scene back then, so, that was, it was just cool to have that connection. That's it in a nutshell. That's really all I can say. That's enough.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to bring up an artifact. I think I may have shown this when I had Lunar on a few months back, but I just happen to have a copy. I don't know if my filter is going to cooperate, but this is the old Suburban Uprising Jersey Beat compilation cassette, which I think is from 85, 86, maybe, no, 84, 85, it says here. Let me read the bands that are on this compilation because I think it's a nice snapshot of that era. So you've got New Breed, Young Turks, Frozen Concentrate,
Yeah.
Bandables, Paid Vacation, Tiny Lights, Mod Fund, Windbreakers, Altar Boys, In Color, Adrenaline OD, Lord John, Swingers, Pleased Youth, Sacred Denial, Disturbed, Love Pushers, Das Damen, Skulls, and Punsters.
Wow, Punsters.
Punsters.
Mark Lanzoff. I can't believe Das Damen's on there too. I actually played with them in September. They played a show, the band I'm in now. We played with them in upstate New York, and they reunited. They were a pretty good band. They were like a New York band, not really Doug, they weren't really a Jersey band, were they?
No. That guy was from New York.
They were from New York,
He was in a band called The Misguided.
Yeah. But they played around. They were around. They played all the bars we did and stuff. That's a pretty cool artifact, Joel, because they're some. I mean, Doug, we know most of those bands. I mean,
I was playing with both Frozen Concentrate and the Young Turks at the time.
And the Young Turks. Well,
that's where I met John Ritchie and the Young Turks.
You drummed for the Young Turks.
Right.
You were on the kit, but I think you played percussion with Frozen, right?
I did both. I did kit and percussion with them.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember Brad was.
Brad. I remember Brad when playing kit with them. I thought maybe you also did some percussion too, but if you went back
in the transition when I was actually leaving Frozen to join Young Turks full time and getting ready to move to Florida.
Yeah, that was before you went to Gainesville for your master's, right?
Right.
Yep, and that was Chris was Chris in the band? Chris Burke?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Chris Burke. Great.
Yeah.
Great guy.
I love that. He's another one. Don't even bring up the Burks, please, because that'll get me.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Joe Burke.
Tom, Were you playing in Lunar Bear when they had that reunion back in 2007 at the
Oh
court?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
and that was my good friend Chris McKenna was actually playing drums in Lunar that edition of Lunar, and Chris and Martin both played. They both played drums that night, right? Doug, didn't they?
I think so.
They
It's
each
kind of
played
no, it was
because I know
that was a
Chris
fun
really,
night, man. That
yeah,
was a fun
Chris
night.
really hit it off with Martin, and they played different cuts, and then I know Dave Drywitz played the trumpet and some
Yeah,
percussion.
that
That
was
was a
nice.
fun night.
I always like when, whenever Dave was involved too. That's all.
Yeah,
Just like
that was
that
a
night
fun
with the
night.
jukebox.
Yeah, with
We're an
the
American
cowbell.
band. He came on the jukebox and Dave pulled out a cowbell and started playing the cowbell along with.
We all got cowbells.
We were having a hell of a night that night, boy.
That was it. That was actually a really fun reunion. That 2007
It
show.
was. It was very. That was a lot of fun.
That was really good. It was great to see Martin.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was actually I was at that show because at that time Martin was doing his first textbook.
Yeah, the book was out.
Yeah, and he was in town. I think he had like an art exhibit earlier that week in New York.
Yes,
And
yes,
then
he did.
yeah, so I went out there to get, because I helped edit that book for him. So I went out
Hmm.
to get
Oh,
my copies and stuff. And of course, see Martin. I've known Martin since like 93. Um, so I was at that gig. That was a lot of fun. It's the first time first and only time I've seen Lunar Bear live because I was a little too young the first time around. So it was cool to see that gig. And yeah, Martin got up, he played at least Bleeding Liberal because I remember that little breakdown that
Well,
song.
he
And I
played
think,
two or three songs.
yeah.
He played a few.
He played a few. Hold on, let me close this door so these dogs don't like.
Yeah, I think there is some video from that night floating around YouTube as well.
Oh,
I
okay.
I see that come up every so
I'll have
often.
to look into that. Yeah, Lunar Bear was a really that was a really unique situation. I mean, I don't even because I mean you can call it music. I mean, it's definitely music, but it was way more than that. It was it all came from John, and because we all liked his writing,
and don't forget Bear.
and Bear. No, definitely
Bear
Bear too.
the
Bear remains
Definitely
the
Bear too.
same.
But it was John's. It was like the words. Like I knew those a lot of that poetry, and I mean, you're like coming up with sound ideas to go around the guy's words, and he made it work almost like they
yeah.
weren't really lyrics. It's hard to explain. It was just a really unique band. It was very cool. It was super aggressive, and it was awesome. There was a lot of abandon in that, and to me, like if a band doesn't have that, there's something missing. There's got to be that sense of abandon, like where you're, though. And I've been lucky that I've been in a few bands like that. I've been in the, and that band definitely had that. And it was the first time I experienced that in my life was in that band, and it was incredible, especially when you're playing with a drummer like Martin. That was
And a
awesome.
lot of improv. I mean, that's
It
the
was all
thing.
improv for the most part. I
Yeah, no,
mean,
we made up everything on the spot, man. I mean, we
there
kept
were some
certain
set
things.
pieces. There were
Yeah,
set pieces, but they weren't always the same. And then there were always elements of improv where we would do something completely off the cuff at every show. I have a lot of that stuff, on
like
file.
Alienation, particularly that song.
Yeah,
There's a couple of them.
it was a great experience. I was really thankful for that. It definitely shaped my musicality a lot.
Yeah, same here.
Well, I know Bad Karma's got their reunion thing happening soon. Maybe Lunar Bear will be the next on the list.
Yeah.
You never know. You never know. But it's a little harder. Boy, John's by me. He lives down here, so he's down in Florida. He's a little bit south of me. And he keeps on threatening to to meet up and stuff, and I keep threatening to meet up because I'm probably worse because my schedule is, I work like 60 hours a friggin' week, so it's a little hard for me to schedule anything. This is like, this reunion is just me taking a week off and saying, you know what, I'm taking a week off and I'm doing this shit.
But
Because
you're
otherwise,
celebrating your son too, right? You're celebrating
that's the main
Charlie.
thing why I'm going up.
Well,
That is
Charlie's
the main
graduating.
thing
Yeah.
I'm going up for. I have to keep
That's a
telling
biggie.
myself that, and it's like, I got myself involved in this, and I kind of got myself in over my head. So, like trying to learn all these songs, and I wrote two new songs. I gotta rehearse other people too. So it's gonna be an adventure. It'll be an adventure going up there. And I mean, I'm not worried about the bad karma stuff because, I think everybody here is pretty stoked as far as what, how we do stuff. We know what we're doing. I don't think we're gonna have too many problems. There might be a clam or two shucking out, but besides that, it should be good.
Very cool. Very cool. Tom, I know you've got a heart out in a
Yeah,
couple.
in a few minutes, but it's all good. I got a few more minutes.
All right, cool, cool. So let's talk about the early days of Bad Karma, because I know initially, from what I can recall from when Doug was on a few months back, it started off with um, a guy named Spook playing bass, right?
House.
Brewhouse.
Right.
Brewhouse Verminsky. Yes.
And legend has it he went out to get a six pack and never returned.
That's great. He jumped on the train and left. Exactly what he did.
I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to,
That's how it started out
I
because
was,
he offered to play guitar, and I was like, I would love to have a second guitar, and he wanted a chance to actually play guitar, which is retarded because, to be honest with you, he's the best bass player in town, and he's playing guitar in his band. But it worked out like that to start off with because Spook was the bass player, and it just for me, I was like, well, let's just do this. You know what I mean? So we had practices, and every time we started doing practices. I'd be hoarse by about the third song from Screaming at Spook House for messing up, all stoned and not what he's doing.
We always practiced in the Court Tavern, by the way, on the basement. That was our home, our Monday practice for 9 years almost, maybe more.
Yeah, long time we practiced.
And in fact, that's where I met Doug. I was playing with this one of the cover bands that I was playing with. I got back from Florida,
Solar
and
Circus.
I was with Solar
Solar
Circus, right?
Circus.
Right.
Dead
And
Grateful
so
Dead cover band, which
I
is
know, right? And so we're playing, and Doug is literally sitting on the bar in the Court Tavern upstairs watching me play. And I'm looking at Doug like, who's this dude sitting on the bar watching me play? And we got to talking after that. And, anyway, long story short,
Brute brought
I just
him
want
in.
to,
Brute brought you in, actually.
did he really?
Yeah, he's the one who said that. And I remember, like, you drove me home to Edison. And of course, back in those days, we were a little reckless. I think we even smoked a joint in the car on the way home. So, not to say that happened, but it might have happened.
It's legal now.
It's
Anyway,
legal now.
before Tom
Yeah.
leaves, I just want to say one more thing with these two guys on. I love these guys. I haven't been around for a long time, but these people are people that in my life will always be people that I consider like family, even if I don't see them for long periods of time. I love them. I love you guys.
Love
I want
you.
to let you know that.
I love Tommy D. I
And
love.
I'm not loaded or anything right now. I mean it. I really
Yeah,
am.
I mean it, man.
I mean it, man.
I mean it, man. Give me a hug, a real hug.
Give me a hanky.
Oh, here's the hanky.
There's a hanky. Exactly. We're all gonna cry now.
But yeah, Joel, I just want to thank you for the interview for the show, and of course, I thank Doug and Wally for agreeing to do this. I think it's going to be fun. I will say, I don't. Bad Karma was another amazing experience for me because I was able to write songs with somebody who really shaped a lot of my musical thought, and that's Doug and Wally as well, especially rhythmically. Wally was a very challenging drummer to work with and always came up with great beats and stuff for our songs. But Bad Karma was an awesome experience. When Doug did the comp a couple of years ago, the afterbirth of the baby boom, and I really sat back and listened to it, I thought it really long and hard about how good those songs were. There's a lot of really good material there. Doug's an excellent lyricist and sets a high bar for a lot of people. For me, I sometimes have a hard time listening to music when I don't hear good lyrics. And that's because of people like Doug and John Ritchie and other people I've been blessed to work with, and just really looking forward to it. And I think the songs are going to be fun to play again. And I just wanted to thank you for doing the interview. And I'm sure I'll talk to these other two guys very shortly about the rehearsal coming up. And just want to thank you again, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I'll see you on the 16th.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to actually meeting you and having some good conversation with you, my friend.
Right on. Have a great night. Thanks for coming on.
All right, take care, guys.
All righty, man.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Whoa, what's going on? Whoa, where am I at? Wait, hold on. Wait, whoa,
Earthquake.
whoa. Whoa. Hold on. You can't hit that button yet, man. There we go. Woo.
Bye, Tom.
There it goes.
There he
Tom's
goes.
iPhone. There goes Thomas' iPhone.
Cool.
Okay.
I'll, I can edit all that stuff out too. So
No, leave it in. Absolutely do not edit that out. That was perfect. That was the perfect. I love that. That was great.
right
Yeah.
on. So yeah, I was glad to have all three of you on.
I'm glad he got at least he got that much. I was gonna say, well, maybe we could do it. He was like, no, no, I was gonna try to reschedule it, but it's like he's like, just do it. I don't want to make things more complicated, which is,
Yeah.
that's cool. He's a good man, Tommy D. He's like I was saying, the funny part about when we started was he decided he wanted to play guitar in a band, because I used to go to his house and hang out with him, and he wanted to play guitar because he had a Rickenbacker. He had a really nice Rickenbacker, which I ended up playing later on in Bad Karma for a little while. It didn't really work the way I really prefer because I ended up playing a couple other instruments that I have a Fender Esquire, which is more like a Telecaster, and that thing is like what I'll be playing at this show because I also had a Les Paul Jr., which I had to sell a couple of years back when I kind of ran into some financial issues. So, yeah, there's a lot of history with him, as far as, but it's funny that because he really was the best bass player in town, I mean. We were very lucky that Tom, that Spook kind of took off and like it left us with Tom because it was the best thing that could have happened, because like Spook, I mean, he was an interesting character. I mean, his girlfriend was how we came up with the name Bad Karma
Hmm.
because we were in the basement of the court practicing, and in the basement, I think the boiler room caught on fire. It was like one of our first practices. That was before Tom even got in there. And he used to have this hippie girlfriend named Crystal who used to sit there and smoke cigarettes and just stare at us and be like, "You guys got bad karma." Because she was like this hippie, this Grateful Dead hippie. So we were like, once the boiler room caught on fire, we're like, yep, bad karma's the name. But one way or another, we're saddled with this name now. So that's how we came up with the name. But Spook didn't last too long, and then I have one gig that we did with him, and actually it's on the bootleg cuts on. There's two cuts on that bootleg part of the Eating the Afterbirth CD, and it's like if you got the boot, you got the bootleg part of it. There's a song called "Hey Bob," which
Hey,
we wrote
Bob.
about Bob, like the owner of the Court Tavern.
And the Limbo song was another song that he
Limbo
was on.
song, which I made sure was on there too, because the Limbo song was the best, where I used to challenge people to limbo under this fucking broomstick, and then I like hit them with the broomstickish. But yeah, like the first when we began Bad Karma, a lot of people ran away, were really scared of me because I was like, I mean, my inspiration was all punk rock, even though we were like Bad Karma was like all over the place musically because I wanted to do different stuff.
And Doug would engage the audience, I mean, directly. So it wasn't like he was being passive and playing to them. He was like, fuck you. Can I say that on?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you can
Okay.
absolutely say that. I already said fuck about 5 times. It's okay. But yeah, I was very into like, the fear ethos of like, insulting the crowd. And then I finally had to be like, you know what, I better dial this back, and because too many people were running from the building scared of me. So like as if I was some scary human being, but they didn't understand punk rock, which is what we were always from. I mean, the funny thing is, I mean, I don't think that, most of the people that were in the New Brunswick scene understood punk rock like we did.
Mm.
Be frank with you. I mean, we were more punk rock than probably most of the bands, than most of the bands were around, and we had more punk ethos than probably any of them, and that's why a lot of people didn't get what we were doing because we'd do full on punk rock songs, but then we'd play stuff that was almost like fusion and shit, or funky stuff, and I
Yeah.
think that a lot of it was because, we came in, I mean, we weren't like influenced by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. We were influenced by the big boys and, Pill, for instance. I mean, I love Pill, and I mean, and I love Gang of Four. Gang of Four are one of my favorite bands, and I mean, I wanted to play that kind of music. So the funny thing is, like later on, when all of a sudden bands like like a band like the Bouncing Souls came out, and they were more into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, whereas we had already went that point, but we got it from a different angle because
But
I
we
wasn't
were
that
we
big.
were good friends with them though. We used to play
Yeah,
basement shows all the
exactly.
time with them,
I didn't
and
begrudge them for that either.
yeah, no, they were sort of them. They were like, Tom Sawyer. They were like these young guys who were idealistic. We're going to do this, and one of the few bands that actually have done it are still doing it, I think, and it's
Oh yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. They're a big band. They're playing Riot Fest this year. They're
Yeah,
like, they made it, man. And I mean, they came back at one point and filmed a concert at the court, probably around 2000. It had to be 2008, maybe. They did a show and they did a whole interview with me. And I was just like, listen, I'm like very proud of these guys. They stuck to their guns and they did this shit. And I mean, to be honest with you, I'm still very proud of them that they did
yeah.
what they did.
I mean,
They
yeah.
did what they stuck to their guns and they did it their way. And they did it. And I mean, they made it. And God bless them. I mean, they played a lot of my parties and we played a lot of their parties and we did a lot of hangs, man. I mean, Tom's gone, but Tom actually gave Brian from the Souls of bass lessons
Mm.
for a long time. He gave him bass lessons. Those guys used to come over and go swimming in his pool, hang out. They're good friends with Tom's wife, Jennifer. So, those guys, we have a pretty big history with them too. But yeah, there was a lot of the New Brunswick scene was very diverse back then too. There
Yeah.
was a lot of
That was a
stuff.
great thing about it. I mean, you could see all kinds of styles of music, and people all got along. I mean, the beautiful thing was, like, with a few exceptions, I think, but most people really got along. At the Court Tavern was like
Yeah,
a meeting place. People would go see each other's bands, support you. I mean, Joel, you were in New Brunswick, so I mean, that was. But the sad thing is, when we back then we had Patrick's, we had the Court Tavern, we had the Melody, we had the Roxy. The bands could play all over the place, and we had a lot of basement parties. I don't think that exists anymore in New Brunswick. I mean, I don't think that there's any clubs
the
like that.
basement parties do.
Basement
Actually, they
parties.
have of all things, there's like a place called Cinco de Mayo that's on French Street, which is a Mexican restaurant that does hardcore shows.
Really?
My son goes to those shows.
Oh,
My son goes to basement shows all the time. He tells me what's going on. He fills me in on New Brunswick.
oh,
So
that's cool.
Yeah,
it came full circle, man. My son's going to shows. So he's a good kid, man. And I'm just like, oof. I'm glad I'm coming up for this thing because it's like, I can't believe he's getting his master's, man. That's like, I'm very proud of him. It's just very awesome. But it's funny how this all turned around. You know what I mean? It's like, there's still stuff going on in New Brunswick, even though they've killed off the clubs, there's still basement shows. I mean, I lived in a basement. I was in a show. I lived in a show house around 2012, 2011. I lived in a show house. I mean, that shit drove me nuts, man, because there's bands be playing right underneath my fucking bedroom. But I liked it because we could do band practices there when I was doing the Mr. Payday thing. So, but that's how New Brunswick always was, man. I mean, we were the ones that, I mean, there was always basement shows, I think, with even like, bands like, the Edison Lighthouse, not Edison Lighthouse. What's the other band that was from there? The one that did Brandy. Brandy, you're a fine looking glass.
Looking
That's
Glass.
they lived on Commercial Ave, and they used to have like basement shows. But like when it came to like hardcore shows, I think we were like, when Pleased Youth did it, we were like one of the first bands to do basement show, and a lot of people got ideas from it, and Decolator got involved with it later too. And we used to play his house like Bad Karma did. We used to play his house. We used to play like the South where the Souls lived. We always would play these basement shows, and it was like a lot of fun. There was always something going on, you know what I mean? The court was rocking at that time. There was always shows at the court. There was basement shows going on all over town, and then you had these other places like Wally said, like the Melody, which was I always thought it was more of a pickup joint, but we had a good time we played there. The cops would show up every time we played though, because it would be so loud. Because we'd bring the big amps up them stairs, man, and almost killed ourselves doing that shit.
Yeah.
But we were so fucking loud that the cops would be there every time we played. They'd be like, the cops would be, you guys got to turn it down. Okay, officer. And then they'd move it back fucking up again.
Well, what's been cool for me in doing these sort of like New Jersey centric videos is how many people, dating back like 40, 45 years are still doing things. They're still actively doing
Yeah.
shows, putting out
Yeah.
records. I had Keith on a couple of weeks ago. I mean,
Yeah.
he's doing stuff. Andy, I had on, Andy's playing in one of my old bands now.
And he's still playing. He still looks almost the same. He looks that he's America's oldest teenager, that guy, man. I swear to God, he looks almost the same as he did when he was like, when he was in Pleased Youth. There's not much of a difference. Or as Bobby used to call him, Andy the friendly skin, as far as like Casper the friendly ghost. That's what he always like. He got that.
By the way, I don't know if you saw his interview, but I brought up the fact that Andy and Decolator dropped the cake on Dave Scott's car. And Andy totally blamed Decolator. He's like, it wasn't Decolator.
Yeah, okay.
He's like, I'll blame it on Paul because he's not here. But it was
That's
Decolator's
good.
idea.
That's good because he wants to keep an Andy in Dave's good graces still.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, I'm a warts and all kind of guy. If it happened, man, I'm gonna tell what happened. I ain't sugarcoating shit. No way. That ain't happening, man. I mean, and the funny thing is I remember Decolator too, man. Like remember Tom and Decolator went out somewhere and we were partying and we were coming back all drunk. And I think Decolator pushed Tom through a bush. We were all fucking crazy. But back then it was like, we'd go out to like the court and get lit. And I mean, it's like the drinks were cheap, man, back then. And you would just go out and, I'd get a lot of shit on the cuff because I was like, hooked up, so. That didn't exactly do my liver any favors, but there we go.
But going back, like you said, Joel, going back quite a ways into the early days of the Court Tavern in particular, when Bobby's dad bought the Court Tavern, which was across the street, then moved it over across the street. Frozen Concentrate was one of the first bands that played there, and Tina Mashi and her folks, and after that, it just there's so many different bands that played there. And when I started with the Young Turks, Tony Shanahan was the bass player for the Young Turks, the initial. And Tony Shanahan is Patti Smith's bass player now, and he has been for 40 years.
Played with Ian Hunter. He's always involved in a lot of stuff. Tony's all over.
Tony's amazing guy. Really, really. I mean, there's a lot of people.
His family owned the bakery in Milltown. And then the brother bought it out and ended up like he's still doing. I think it's still there. Shanahan's Bakery, but Tony's like, yeah, I'm not in the bakery business.
He was great.
I'm in the bass business. I'll play with Patti Smith and make a lot of money, or I assume he's doing okay.
Mm.
Tony's like Tony's a working musician, God bless him. It's not easy to do that,
Right.
Being a working musician it's never anything that I could ever say, I'm a working musician. Yeah, right. That's why I work 60 hours a friggin' week to
Right.
try to, like, keep a roof over my head.
I've got a Young Turks 45 here. After Lunar was on the show, he sent me this huge, I mean, huge box of like Lunar Bear and his books, and there was a Young Turk 7-inch in there as well.
Huh.
I
So,
have that lying
Which
around
one
too.
is it? Do you know?
I could grab it real quick.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Because I'm assuming it's one that he recorded. He was on, right? Because
Yeah,
because Billy
Yeah,
recorded some stuff before. Uh, but yeah, we did a
Billy
number
Snow.
of singles, and they turned out great. I mean, when we did the Bad Karma first single, we couldn't find one that was punched right, and they were like, we went on the radio show, and they were going, hey, hey, and Doug's looking
No,
at them.
yeah, no, that was like
It was
Tom went to. We ended up getting the first record we did was this. We ended up doing it on this Red Ghost Records, which was this guy Dave Clark. Because I remember
Dave
Dave
Clark.
Clark. Because how could you forget a name like Dave Clark? So Dave, like, Dave was like, "I'll put out your 45 or whatever," and he didn't really put it out. We bought it, we paid for it, so we did it on his label, which ended up being it. He goes, "Yeah, I use a place up in Newark." So he goes up there, like Tom goes to pick up the records, and he
I
says,
picked it up. I picked up the
"Oh,
records.
you did? I
Yeah,
thought Tom did." Because
no, I picked up the records.
Tom told me it looked like, like a scene out of Eraserhead. It was
Oh,
like fucking nuts.
it was a little crappy warehouse in Newark, and in like one of the worst parts in Newark at
Yeah,
the time. I mean,
yeah, there's a
but
lot
yeah,
of bad parts. It must have been Rat Street. That was always my favorite, Rat Street in in Newark. I remember coming back from the pipeline, and me and my buddy Paul Buck, and we're driving down the street, and I go, "Where the fuck are we at?" And I look up, and it's like, "Oh, we're on Rat Street."
yeah.
It literally said Rat Street, and I'm like, "Oh, that's one of the times I wish there were cell phones back in those days because I would
But
have."
the name of the single, so you know, is George Washington Smoked Pot and Owned Slaves. And it was Doug's title. I thought it was brilliant. It had nothing to do with the songs, but it was just great, And we had some original artwork on there by a guy named Mike Egerman, and it was if it was a viable single, it would have been great. But to find the ones that actually played
There
correctly,
were
we had
there
to go
were
through.
there were playable ones, and I
Some of
mean.
them were, yeah.
They're playable. Matter of fact, I did auction off the couple the ones that I had on me that I found. I went through all the records and found ones that actually played, and I auctioned them off for a buddy of the band who during COVID was like he was involved in live music, and he ended up not working and was really falling behind. So I tried to give him a hand at least, which he was very, very cool about. I will not disclose names because he's one of those guys that's pretty proud, and he was a good guy, and he was always a good friend of the band. So for me, it was just like the a right thing. I don't think that anybody in the band would argue with me doing it. Anyway, but yeah, there were some obvious problems with that 45. There were a lot of them were pock marks in them, so they would just pop. And I mean, yeah, it was just a weird thing, a weird coincidence. But we recorded pretty quickly. First gig was in '88. I think we had the recording. We were in the recording studio in '88, and it was a little rough because I mean, I really, even though I had written stuff with Pleased Youth, I was starting to get my shit together as far as writing, and working with Tom helped a lot too, and Tom and Wally, and we forged ahead, and really I learned the craft of writing music, writing songs. That record isn't the best record in the world, but it was a start, you know what I mean? It's like go out there and do it. Don't hesitate. Just go
Mhm.
out and play. You know what I mean? I mean, I had come off of that whole Pleased Youth thing, and and it was like starting all over again. So, and it ended up being like, believe me, Bad Karma was an education all around, much like Lunar Ensemble was. Lunar was, taught me how to do improv, and Bad Karma taught me how to write music,
Mm,
really, and write lyrics, learn how, like, because I'm a stickler for lyrics because I don't really like running. I don't like singing. I don't like doing throwaway songs. I'm not a big throwaway song kind of guy. I need to have a song that has something behind it.
right.
So for me, it's important.
Well, as I said when you were on the last time, I was born in 77, so I missed a lot of it the first time around. But by the time I was 10 years old, I was walking across the street and getting the EC rocker at the time.
Yeah.
So I was way into music. And, being that age, I couldn't obviously, go down to New Brunswick and see a band play. But I was reading like Bob Macon's column at the time and learning about all these bands who were from Jersey. And because I was so young, New Brunswick may as well have been Los Angeles for me.
Yeah.
I couldn't get down there. I was soaking up all this stuff. And as I said to Doug, Bad Karma was like the first band I was kind of like into learning about who were in Jersey. I didn't know at that time even about Lunar Bear, although I was getting into like Killing Joke and stuff at the time too, and learning about Martin and all that. So the more I kind of read about things, the more connections were being made, and oh, this band played with this band and this band. And then as I got a little older, started playing in clubs myself, I was playing shows with Niblick Headbane, you know, getting to know Andy. Oh, he's from Please Use with this Bad Karma guy, and you realize everything's kind of like this. And then fast forward a couple years later, I'd meet up with Martin, and we've been doing stuff on and off forever. So it all kind of connects at some point. But Bad Karma was definitely one of those entry point bands for me that made me realize that there was cool stuff happening in my home state.
Hmm.
So, I'm excited the fact that there's going to be a show in 2025 and I get to go to it because I
Oh,
missed
that's
it
cool.
so much the first time around. Um, but I wanted to get into your history, Wally, because you've been playing for quite a while. You had sent me some information earlier, and I know you were out, you hit the ground running playing in bands at least by the mid 70s, right? You were out doing things.
Yeah, I played in high school. We played, in cover bands mostly, but yeah, no, I've been playing for a while.
So you were, playing with the Young Turks, you were playing with Frozen Concentrate. So you were kind of in obviously this whole scene that grew out of New Brunswick. And the one thing that I've learned doing this channel is in New Jersey, because when I was growing up young reading about it, it seemed like it was like one big scene. But then you realize different cities had their own vibe. Like you had like the Clifton scene, and then as I got older, I was going to the pipeline. So that
Mhm.
Newark, New Jersey Oi thing that Andy ended up being part of, I was more there. Then when I went to college at Montclair, I was going to Maxwell's, and I was spending a lot of time in Hoboken. Then I started a band. The other people in that band were Jersey Shore people. So I ended up going to the Brighton Bar, and doing shows for Jacko and all that.
Taco. Yeah,
So, but my whole point is you see
$3.
cities in Jersey are like their own camps of music,
yeah.
it's all very different from each other. So for you, what defined New Brunswick? What made that scene exclusive in and of itself? What would you say defined the vibe of that scene during that time?
Well, to get to your point, even in New Brunswick, even though we had a very wonderful scene going on, and especially focused around the Court Tavern. That was sort of one scene, and there were other scenes. There was like the melody scene, which was more of a dance kind of a thing, and then Roxy, and there were different sort of contingents of musicians, and we all kind of got along. But the Court Tavern was kind of unique, and that's where I sort of felt at home at the Court Tavern. I would play at other places, but I felt at home at the Court Tavern, and that's where I met Doug and Tom, and after I went to college. I mean, I knew Tina Mashi from college, and we went to the Court Tavern to play together. I was playing with her at the time. I met Billy Snow, and the funny thing is, the way I met Martin was Billy Snow was going out with a woman who became Martin's girlfriend. And I was really good friends with her. So Billy and her broke up, and she started dating Martin. I became sort of a house friend of Martin and this woman, and she was great, and she was a great person. Anyway, so these ways that you play in a band and you connect with a certain club or a certain group of people. So I had the Martin thing going, but I also had I had the Court Tavern, and with Doug and all the people that he knew. He brought in a lot of his friends that I got to know a little bit of Paul Decolator. I'm an attorney, and I represented Paul Decolator and his band. In fact, I beat Sony on a case. They wanted to use the name of his band, and the Loose, and we had registered
Great
it.
story.
And so I called up Sony Records, their legal department. I said, hey, you can't do this program this weekend because we own the name. Paul owns the name. And so the guy said, well, that's not possible. He checked it out. He goes, okay, all right, we messed up. Yeah. Well. He goes, well, how much do you want for it? How much do you want for the name? So I went and I talked to Paul. I said, Paul, this is your opportunity, man. I know you like the name. We registered it and everything, but you can get thousands of dollars right now for this. You just name your price. Paul's like, no, damn it, this is the name of my band. I'm not going to do anything. So I'm like, all right, if that's what you want to do, man, and I didn't charge him anything for it. I did it pro bono, and my boss hated that. My boss was like, you beat Sony for free. I'm like, yeah, man. That was my
And
only
ended
victory.
up not getting a penny out of it because of Decolator, of course.
Yeah, well, no, but I wasn't expecting that because, I was just trying to help Decolator out because he's one of our friends. But anyway, so those kinds of relationships while I was living in New Brunswick in the area were just exceptional. And it also, we knew people that had drug problems. We knew people who didn't have drug problems. I mean, people had all kinds of backgrounds in New Brunswick, but they all sort of came together. And at the Court Tavern, it was really cool. People just were cool to each other. It was really nice. You'd walk in there and you'd get a beer, and sometimes Bobby would throw you a free beer or whatever, and people would talk, and they could be different bands. And John Ritchie, of course, he's the kind of guy who would intersect with everybody. I mean, he knew everybody, and everybody really respected him. And he was the kind of person who, with a physical disability, was able to function at a highest level. I mean, this guy's amazing, right? I mean, he's a fantastic poet. And we used to, by the way, we also had a poet community because Bad Karma did a lot of stuff with Danny Schott, who had the Long Shot magazine for a long time. And if you go back maybe 10 editions, you'll see us, Bad Karma, listed as having done
Good benefits
fundraisers.
all the time. Yeah, we
So
did really good shows.
we knew all these. I mean, this was a community that grew out of the art experience, both poetry and music, and it was really very fulfilling in terms of creativity. And yeah, so I think I mean, the Court Tavern was a wonderful place. And it's funny that if you go there today, the Court Tavern, the building is still there amongst all these high-rise things that have gone up. The building's still there. The Court Tavern, unfortunately, is not. But you know, such is life for clubs, right? I mean, unfortunately, but also when Bobby had to kind of give it up, and they went through such hard situations there. And Bobby's dad and other stuff. And when Bobby passed, Doug actually called me. I hadn't spoken to him for a long time and said, "Oh, Bobby passed," and it meant a lot. And because I connect a lot of my memories in New Brunswick with the people who hung out at the court.
Hmm. Yeah, my court experience was much later. I started going there late 90s because I still am pals with the band Electric Frankenstein. So they'd play there and I'd go down with them. And then I ended up playing a few years later. I was in the Undead with Bobby Steele on and off for about 10 years. So we did a show there. It was a benefit show. Paul from AOD put it together. It was us, 96% uncertain. Um,
76% uncertain, but
yeah,
that's
thank you, 76% uncertain. And who else played? Dave Jones from Mental Abuse did a solo thing. And I think I played it with Broken Heroes and AOD too, um, prior. So I had a little bit of experience, but it was a bit later. But
that's when I was booking the club too. So I mean, I probably, Paul probably reached out to me to do that gig, and I was like, okay, Paul, you know what I mean? Because I always,
Yeah.
I always tried to work out stuff for my old friends, you know what I mean? And AOD were, I go back with AOD a long ways just because I was on their record label and
Right.
shit, and they gave me a chance to put a record out back in the day. So believe me, I always kind of deferred to those cats. Not to mention the fact I have a lot of respect. They were a great band. Um, a lot of fun memories with that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for
I
sure.
mean, that was the time when I actually was booking the court was like the late '90s into the 2000, into 2000 after. I booked a club, I think from 97 up. After that, after Eric Gundry like basically departed, I basically ended up being the booker. So that was a whole other thing going on trying to book the club. But believe me, don't try this at home, kids, because that is like it's a difficult business because if you mess up, it's like all the guys you work with, they're not making money because you get a bad show or somebody backed out on you. It's a lot of pressure to be a booker in a club. And everybody thinks, wow, that's really cool being a booker in a club. Yeah, it's not. It's not a lot of fun because, then people get mad at you because you're not giving them gigs. You're
Yeah.
like, people get pissed off at you. It's a terrible thing, you know what I mean? It's what it is, you know what I mean? It's like I used to book the club with this guy Mick who was in Bad Karma.
Hmm.
He was like when we were a four-piece towards the end, and Mick was the second guitar player, and me and Mick used to be doing the booking. Like there's so much bullshit coming across your desk, like like record, like it's like cassettes. It was back then. It was all cassettes, and me and him would just get like loaded and then like play baseball and like smack them out the windows. Like at one point, the tree out in front of the court was just covered in like tape coming down, which is terrible. But it's like that's what we did. You know what I mean? It's like you get frustrated listening to bad music a lot. That's a
Yeah.
fucking terrible part of being a booker. It's not easy.
Well,
Yeah,
I booked shows for a couple years in the 90s at an American Legion Hall. So I got a taste of that. And the reality is if you're a promoter or whatever, you're booking shows, even if it's a tiny place or a club, you're never going to make everyone happy. Perfect
no, never.
example, hindsight has showed us how important Anthony Trance was to the pipeline. When Anthony from Sacred Denial came on board and booked the pipeline the last couple of years, that club was around. You know, he was putting on amazing shows, but half the people didn't like him because he was the promoter, right?
No, it's difficult. You're in a
Yeah.
bad position. Actually, we were going to get together and skeet shoot some CDs with him. It's terrible too. But I remember, like, because Mick was good friends with him, and he was like, yeah, he wants to get together, man. We're gonna go out and we're gonna get a skeet machine and take the CDs. That's terrible, but it's part of the booking, I mean, it's just, you can't book everybody, and you don't know what people are, I believe me, there's times when I book stuff that I thought was total horse shit, and they packed the club. So, my taste notwithstanding. Sometimes you got to let your taste take a back seat to what's, you give bands a chance, particularly if they're local, if they're like close by. It's kind of hard to book bands from out of town because
Right.
how many people are they going to bring in? You know what I mean? But there was times when I booked stuff that I was like never that fond of, and yeah, I mean it's just man, there was some bad music, but boy, there was a couple bands I know that packed that place, and I came in the bar and they're like, "You got to see this, the whole basement's packed." I'm like, "What? That band? How the hell did that happen?" Those guys, the only reason they didn't get skeet shooted is because they were local, I mean, but there were some winter bands. But anyway, let's get off that subject. Let's not dwell on, shooting people's CDs.
Well,
Uh,
Wally, I have another artifact here.
okay.
My filter is probably going to screw this up, but I brought this up when I had Martin on because you play on this record, the
Oh
Born
yeah,
Brain EP.
that's right.
There we go.
There you go.
Yep, yep.
So,
I played percussion on that. Yeah.
and Brian Brain was a band that he had during his Pill days, and when he relocated to Jersey, it kind of morphed into another version, and he kept that going for a while because this EP is recorded August 18th, 1989.
That's when he had Margot with who was in the Go-Go's when she
Jeff
was
and
in the
Margot.
Go-Go's.
They were
Yeah.
there. They were the key. Jeff and Margot, and yeah, and he had another a drummer from New York who was playing. Martin was fronting as a singer.
Yeah, no, that was the whole thing with Martin.
Joe was the drummer. I forget
He
his
put a
last name
lot
was
into he put a lot into that band. You know what I mean? And it's an interesting, interesting time in New Brunswick too, because they used to play the court all the time.
Mm.
So that was pretty cool, you know what I mean? It's like they were just another band in the scene at that time, and it happened, and Martin had that whole Invisible Records thing going on, and he had some local bands on there too.
Yeah, one of
He
the
left
songs
by the
was
time he left by the time that Bad Karma came about, actually. I
one of
think
the songs on that album was actually featured on MTV, and some of my relatives saw it, and they said, "Oh, your band was on MTV." Now I'm not so pleased with MTV, but it's okay. It's a different scene. It's completely different. I mean, a different
MTV
context.
has nothing to do with. No, they do produce some of my favorite shows that I watch, but besides that, I mean,
Well, it was a big thing though. I mean, when they came out, I mean, it was a unique
Yeah.
format,
yeah, I
and
don't understand how they just like kind of got away from music completely. But, they really kind of ruined music anyway, so fucking goodbye. I mean, to me, every once in a while you'd see a decent video on there, but most of the time it was like, it was Journey and, all these shitty bands that no one really wanted to watch. I mean, even I remember back then, I mean, that's what hardcore was a big reaction to all that shit. You know what I mean? I mean, there was some bad goddamn stuff that came out of there, but every once in a while you'd see X on there or you'd see
Right.
some other band.
well,
Like,
I think what
you know,
happened with MTV, which is really strange. I mean, they used to have networks, right? In the old days, they were record companies and networks and radio networks had a monopoly over all the music. When MTV came out, they were the ultimate monopoly because they were the only video channel, and to get on that station was a unique, opportunity. It was, so we always used to talk about in our music about being looking in, look on the outside looking in. We have, Doug had a song about that, about bands that would just never ever be recognized, even though they were really good bands, because there's such a small universe of record labels that would get music played on the radio and produced and distributed. And so, we were all DIY. The world has changed dramatically in terms of technology. And so that, I mean, now we can go on and we could actually listen to our legacy album and other things. And you can look up records that you did in the 70s and 80s and that are available on streaming, and so that access is brand new. And I don't know what we would have done with that access if they had it in our day, but
no, it's
you know,
hard to say because I mean, I thought we were a very good band. It's just we never really got the break. And we were always trying to do stuff like, we didn't really have a lot of recorded output. We had like the one CD out and the what's the name in the record, like the single.
the single, yeah.
That's the only two things we really ever put out. And I mean, we always were recording stuff and we never had the money to go out and put stuff out. Finally we broke down and once we got really a bunch of good stuff together because we went in this place. A friend of ours, Ron Howden, had a studio in Hightstown, funny Hightstown, New Jersey. There you go. Recorded most of our stuff in Hightstown at Ron's studio. Ron was in a band called Nectar from the 70s. They were like a psychedelic band. Ronnie always played with he played with Tom at they did a lot of they did a
Blues
lot of
cover
open
stuff.
mics, open mic nights,
Yeah.
doing stuff like that. You know what I mean? And Tom knew him from that, and then he had a studio in his backyard, so we recorded like 90% of our output. We recorded with Ronnie, and it was a good event. That was a good experience. I learned a lot more about the studio. I mean, now I know now what I know in hindsight, I probably would have done things a lot differently now, but
And
I
I'm
had
glad
to
you brought.
learn. Go
Sorry.
ahead, Bob.
No, I'm glad you brought up Ron because Ron was also part of the local scene, drummer, like you, Joel, and like me, and like Martin. But here's a guy who was in a major band, a major touring band in the '70s and early '80s, who was part of the local scene, and he played with a number of different folks. And I was actually did partner with him, and we got a bunch of blues albums produced in Germany. We went around and got a bunch of artists and got them in, and it wasn't a deal that screwed everybody. The Germans were really like, you get to keep all your rights, and if you make any money, we'll split it with you, and we'll give you an advance, a small advance. But where American record labels were, well, we'll give you an advance, but you're going to owe us the rest of your life, and we'll own the copyright to your tune. We'll own all
In
this stuff,
perpetuity.
and basically ruining any chances of going off on your own. So Ron is an interesting person to bring into this conversation too, in terms of what was happening in New Brunswick at the time. Because there's people from you look at Martin and Ron, are people who are very successful musicians in the commercial world, just hanging out, and they're always just very accessible people.
Hmm. Well, going back to Martin for a sec, because the lineup of this Brian Brain EP, the musicians, very interesting combination of people. Obviously, you've got Martin, you've got Margot Oliveria, who founded the Go-Go's. She ended up on this record. Jeff Smythe, I know Margot and Jeff have been together for forever. John Bechtel,
Yeah.
who's been in ministry for a bunch of years. As a matter of fact, he's on either going on tour or is already on tour with ministry now.
Oh, wow.
Joe Trump was the other
Joe
drummer.
Trump. That's right.
Just had a birthday last week.
No relation to who.
Yeah, that other guy.
That other guy.
Yourself on percussion, and Felice Rosser is on the record as well, doing vocals and Grapevine, it says here. So not sure what that is. But this is a snapshot of that time too.
Yeah.
When Invisible, was a New Brunswick label. Well, actually, I think at this time this was done, and he was already out in Chicago when this came out because it's got a Chicago address. But I guess it was recorded and probably took a while to come out, maybe.
Yeah. He
Uh,
had to get his machinery up and running too. So
Yeah, he just
he,
left, I
he was
think.
doing everything out of his place in New Brunswick off of Commercial Ave. Not Commercial Ave. What was that? Joyce Kilmer?
George Kilmer, Joyce, off of Joyce Kilmer. It
Yeah,
was,
Joyce
yeah,
Kilmer in New Brunswick. He had like a warehouse that he used to have that him and Aaron lived in.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that's where he did a lot. He silk screened a lot of his own covers. He did a lot of stuff. He was, Martin was always pretty, resourceful about doing stuff. That's how he ended up getting involved with all this other, DIY stuff in the books that he put out. So
And the museum is fantastic. I mean, what a great concept, right? I mean, he's super bright guy.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
Probably a
remember.
genius.
I mean, and he's still in the thick of it. When you purchase something from him, if it's a hand screened cover, there's a 99.9% chance he was the one who actually screened it. I remember when Pigface, we did the House of Blues in Chicago for the 25th anniversary show. Um, Martin had like a rehearsal show on Thanksgiving night, which was really cool at a place called Reggie's. And then the next night was the House of Blues. So most people are kind of in town for the Thanksgiving show. I turn up like just as the rehearsal show started, ended up playing the last two songs. Um, but that night, Martin and his kids are screening all the shirts to sell at the House of Blues. Like the kids are up all night screening, you know. So I respect the hell out of that, And as a matter of fact, I've been working with Martin quite a bit recently because I'm digitizing about 25 years worth of interviews I have on cassette.
Hmm.
And some of them will be donated to the museum in tangible form, and others I'm digitizing in case he wants to do like a listening room or something there. Because I've got a lot of Killing Joke interviews with different members of that band. I've got a lot of Gang of Four interviews, you know, certainly musicians who fall into that post-punk thing, and a lot of guys who aren't here anymore. I had a tape the other day with Andy Gill from Gang of Four. Found that. So I'm like, I should digitize this and get it to Martin. You know, God forbid, if I get struck by lightning or hit by a train, at least some of this stuff is going to be preserved elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but he's always got 20 things going on. He's putting out a record that kind of ties into something he and I will be doing later this year. But he's got 3D glasses coming with the record, and he's got a screen like a 3D print. I mean, it's kind of endless with that guy. It never ends. So, um, but it's cool that there's an intersection. And that's what's beautiful about New Jersey, I think, because it doesn't seem at its face to be a hub because it's New Jersey. But when you really dive into it, man, it's such a rich history, and so many people have come from decades, and very accomplished people, you know. As far as New Brunswick versus, say, Newark, if I were to compare the two, I'd use kind of like a Cleveland comparison. Newark, the pipeline, all that stuff, that was the Dead Boys. Court Tavern, New Brunswick, that was Pere Ubu.
Yeah. It's pretty close.
Yeah. You know,
That's not even going into the amazing musicians who came out earlier, and also the Black American musicians who came out of the Newark area, especially amazing musicians. I mean, New Jersey, yeah, for some reason I think it attracted a lot of people, maybe because of location, but it was amazing. You'd run into people all the time in New Jersey like that, yeah. So I mean, I don't know what the scene is now. Haven't been living there for years, but I think things are a little bit different just because things are, the whole industry is different, really, right? Not as many bands that are out there anymore. I mean, or real band. I mean, like live music playing bands kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, I go down there every so often to see. I'll be coming down for your thing, but most of the time, if I come down to see a friend play who's still in Jersey, it's usually at Dingbats in Clifton, and it seems to be really the only place that's left.
Hmm.
So inevitably it's going to be that club because the Loop Lounge is gone, Connections is gone, a lot of the shore places are gone, the Brighton's gone. The Pony is still around, but the Pony was never really like a thing for, I mean, I played there, but you know what I mean? It wasn't
Sure.
like a hub, it wasn't like the Court, you know what I mean? It was the Pony was always kind of like a bigger, different thing. But as far as there being actual venues, I mean, I know Randy does shows, obviously, but it's a different world, and it's a different world
You
every.
got Pino's in New Brunswick. All the New Brunswick people ended up migrating to Pino's, which is in Highland Park. That's like a club that's there still, and Wally just had a bad interaction with them. So, but I played Pino's a bunch of times, and I never had any issues. Obviously, there's a person they're booking now who seems to not have their shit together. So,
Yeah, yeah. So they booked our band. I have a band called the Heavy Editors. We just put out an album, and we wanted to play there. And she booked us, right? And she said, "Great, we'll play." So then the announcement for our band playing said John Bird and Friends. My real name is John, right? So I don't know where she got that information, but anyway, so that went out there, and people were calling me, what the fuck is this? What is John Burnett friend? My band was like, what the hell is this? And so I call her back, and I'm like, by the way, it's not John Burnett friend. I gave you all the information in the album. Here it is again. This is who we are. She goes, oh, well, maybe this isn't the kind of music we're looking for to play with the other band that's playing there. And I said, we don't care. We'll play with anybody you want to put us with. And she's like, I'm not sure now. And this is like, she's gone.
you already planned this thing, and
We were booking a tour, and we set the date so that it would go along with other places we had in this area. So anyway, after that, I was like, okay, I'm, I'm out. And I wrote back to her and I said, fine, great. If you ever want to book us again, just let me know.
so I never had that problem with them in the past, but they didn't have a booker like that either, though.
Yes.
it was always the people who owned it who were always kind of nice, and they always were cool about everything. And they never argued with me because I brought people in there, and they knew there was going to be people in there that are going to drink. So, I never had an issue, but obviously whoever's booking it now is doing. I've heard some stories about it.
I don't even know. All I know is I had a very crazy experience.
Anyway, this is why we're playing at Randy's because
Yeah.
I go back with Randy quite a way too, or quite a ways with Randy. My wife Tracy's like very good friends, very good friends with Randy growing up, and she used to be at City Gardens all the time. She used to make the handouts and the flyers for City Gardens. And I ended up becoming very friendly with Randy because we'd stop by the man cave
Hmm.
and and go hang out and like and we talk to Randy for a while. I'd buy some records from him. He always had some cool stuff lying around, so I always was like try to make sure I bought stuff from Randy.
Yeah.
And but Randy's a good guy, and I was like when I came time to do this, I had sent up some CDs for that's the Slugger CD up to them, up to him and Lenny, Lenny from Buy Our Records.
Sure.
And when I sent them up to them, they were like, hey, I really like this stuff, and I was like, well, I'm planning on coming up, and I'm going to come up for my son's graduation. Maybe we'll do a show, and that's how this ended up happening because Randy and I wanted to go to Randy because I played with Pleased Youth there, and Randy was really decent about the money. He's a good guy overall, you know what I mean? And, I knew I would have a good deal going with Randy as opposed to like this other unknown quantity that I didn't want to have to deal with.
Right.
And, I mean, unless I want to book a Legion Hall, which is not exactly in the cards right now, I probably could have in Milltown, but as I booked my wedding there and I was a member of the Milltown American Legion of all things, because of my dad, I had a Sons of the American Legion card, and I'm about as far away from being a son of the American Legion as you possibly could imagine. But I did it because we got a cheap wedding venue, and Tracy was like, just get in there and get your thing, and then we'll get the wedding venue for $150. So I'm like, perfect. That's it. Rent the hall, and then we'll do our own wedding. So, and I could have done it there, but I'm like, yeah, those people might not appreciate when they hear that music coming through the ceiling. So, or through the basement or whatever coming up. It was in the basement. That's where the hall was in the basement. There was upstairs and the downstairs. We might actually have played the Legion Hall at some point with Pleased Youth, I think. I know we played the VFW Hall in Edison,
Hmm.
and I think we must have played VFW Hall somewhere down the line. While I know we played that place up in Hoboken. Remember that club in Hoboken? It was not even a club. That was that was another Danny Shot
And he
adventure.
shot. Yeah, that's right. It was
And it was like it was an old, it was like, it seemed like it was an Elks Club at some point, and it had a back room that was a big stage, and it was like a lot of fun. And we played with the Raging Lamos, who are like
yeah, they were great. Oh, they were
one of
wonderful.
our favorite bands and one
They
of
were
our
great.
very good friends of ours. That was a band that was like I really can appreciate, They were always entertainment, man. I mean, a little later, you got like they got a little loaded, a little too loaded on stage. But you know, the
Yeah.
best show they ever did, I think, was after Steve got sober and did a show sober, and they were like, man, they were so fucking good that night. But they were like that night we played with them at this place. I forgot. I don't even remember the name of the
I
place.
don't either. I don't either.
It was it was a street. It was named after a street. The street it was on, and I can't remember the name of the street, but like the street's still there, but the club's gone. And it was a weird place. We walk in, and there was like a stove in the middle of the floor in the front room. And we're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, but there was a number of places that we played that were pretty weird too. Remember the Temple of the Raging Chicken in Philly?
Yeah, no, that was another one. That was like a big warehouse, and
Have you heard of that, Joel? The
I
Temple of the
haven't.
Raging Chicken?
No.
It was like a movement.
probably wouldn't have. They kept moving around, but
Yeah,
they
they
were
would they
like
would they would rent a place,
warehouses.
warehouse, and they would have a band there, and they would go until the cops came. But basically you could drive in, they'd have all these kegs of beer, and different bunch of bands would play, and they would just play until somebody complained, unless somebody didn't complain. And the cops usually did come.
We played a gig there. It was so fun. And I mean, it was like that was such a fun night. And this one band was on the bill. And the band and the name was Dust Ward. And they really looked like they just stepped out of the Dust Ward. And I, like an asshole, I'm like smoking a joint with these guys afterwards. And I'm talking to him and I'm like, man, you guys were great. He goes, what are you, an asshole? The fucking Philly guys. What are you, an asshole? No, I mean, no, you guys are like the fucking jerks. He goes, fuck you. The guy's all pissed off at me and shit. And he had the best weed, man. I was like fucking stoned, man. It wasn't dusted, thank God. I was like, stupidly, I did this, even though the name of the band's Dust War. I'm smoking a joint with this fucking guy. These guys, and they all look like, they all had that look like they were just came out of the dust ward. And it was just like a fucking nutty. Like we played some gigs in Philly. That was another place that was like a strange because Philly's one of those towns where you'll never you gotta get a lucky break to get a good show there. And we did one time. I think we played the place that's now the Pontiac Grill. It was JB Dobbs. Was that the name of the place? Wow. It was on South
I think
Street,
that sounds familiar. Yeah, we played another place. We played a diner. Remember,
Silk City.
at Silk City, which is still there, I
Yeah, no,
think.
Silk City was like there was like three people there, and that's the way you always Philly shows would always go. You get there would be three fucking people there, and it just so happened the one guy that was there is this guy Brubaker, who was like a major hardcore scenester from back in the day. He was in a band called Circle of Shit, and he was a fucking tough punk rock guy. But we broke out a Misfits cover, and he was just like, "Fucking Misfits, that's cool." I'm like, oh, you impressed Brubaker. He's the only fucking one here. Because I always heard stories about Brubaker being like, he was one of those Philly guys that would like beat the living shit out of you pretty much if you even walked in front of him. But we played Silk City, that and nothing. But we played this place on South Street, and we had booked
JD
the
Dobbs.
guy,
Yeah.
this guy. I forgot this guy's name. He was a promoter, and he booked us in, and we got the perfect spot and we fucking destroyed that place. And I walked out of there, and people were like, "Holy shit!" They were like, because that was like the height of when I really brought out the double amp setup. So we were so fucking loud, but we sounded really good. And I mean, that was one of those ones where I thought we were actually going to break in Philly finally, because Philly is one of those towns where you gotta hang in there, like even more than New York. New York,
We played a lot in New York too, but it was nothing came of it. But it was good.
Yeah, we always had good shows. We actually did a really good show in New York at what's
the
that
con.
place that was on Avenue A?
Oh, not the Continental. I was thinking the Continental, but that's
Not the
up further
Continental.
front now. Uh,
Shit. I'm not even doing an edit.
we played with the upper crust. Is that the one we played with the upper crust?
No, no, we played with the Upper Crust in New Brunswick. That was the one we played with the Cadillac Tramps.
Mm.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Cadillac Tramps were so good, man. Good, what a band, man.
That's right.
That dude who was a singer for him, for them was the best. I just saw a documentary about them on Amazon because they were
Huh.
like, they were one of those bands that should have been huge and
Oh
just
yeah.
break. And that other, well, the guy who's the singer, I can't remember his name either. I'm fucking terrible with names.
Gabby.
Gabby was a really cool dude, and he had that band with Steve Soto from the Adolescents.
Manic
Uh,
Hispanic.
Manic Hispanic, and they were great, man. But he was in the Cadillac Tramps, this guy Gabby, and he was the nicest guy. Afterwards, he came up, he shook my hand, he was like, "You guys are really good." I'm like, "Man, I don't know. You guys fucking kind of killed us tonight. You guys were really fucking good." And I mean, I was like so impressed, and I always thought they were going to be such a big band, and they just didn't. It didn't happen, and it's a shame. He was a really nice guy, and he ended up dying later, I guess, with he had liver cancer or something. He was a bad drug addict, and that's where those guys all knew each other from, was from rehab. That's where those guys, and they were all sober, and that was the whole thing. That was a way to keep their sobriety, was to
Yeah.
be in the Cadillac Tramps. but he was such a nice guy. And I mean, they were so good. But that was another like cool gig that we just happened to get. That was one night we did pretty good in New York. That was one of the few nights because New York is another place where you could, the one place that I could say, the Continental.
I
Now,
like the Continental. Yeah.
Continental, we did one show there where we absolutely destroyed that fucking place.
Yeah, it was a good show.
That was during the flip side shows. And we were at the peak of our powers. That's when we were at like we had the four-piece Bad Karma going. We had played the night before at the court and we headlined. We headlined the court. And then the next night we played the Continental and Noel at the Continental was like, "Yeah, you guys are opening up." And I was like, "You know what, Noel, go fuck yourself. I'm going down to the Holiday and having a drink. And I'll come back and we'll be second on the bill. And I don't give a fuck who you put on first, but someone's going on before us. You're not fucking us tonight. No way." And he was like, okay. He fucking gave in. I'm surprised he did because I wasn't having it. And I was no way. And I don't think that the guy, Martin, the guy who was doing the flip side thing, would have argued with me or argued with, with Noel about it either. Because the night before we had fucking blew the fucking roof off the court. We played with Nashville Pussy,
No,
and
they
the
were
rider
great.
from Nashville Pussy
Great
was
band.
like was riding my back while I was doing a guitar solo in the crowd. That's like before Nashville Pussy really kind of blew up. That was the first tour that they were doing, and that was like one of the first shows that I actually had at the court. Was the flip side show because I was still like Eric Gundry was still doing it, still booking, but I ended up I ended up being it ended up being the first show, and he was like, "Can you do the show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, I want to do the show," because I loved 9 Pound Hammer, and Blaine was in 9 Pound Hammer before he was in Nashville
National
Pussy,
Pussy,
and
right?
we ended up meeting that band, the Pleasure Fuckers from Spain.
From Spain, yeah, they were
Those
fun.
guys were a lot of fun. I remember, doing some illegalities with them in the dressing room before our set. So, and those guys were nice guys, and we had a lot of fun, man, that night, and we destroyed. And then next night we got to go play. Oh, they want us to open at the Continental. I'm like, fuck you. So we came back after I had a couple cocktails. We got up and afterwards, Noel was like, holy shit. I'm like, yeah, no, that's why we didn't go on first, you fucking jerk
We
off.
also played CB's a number of times in New York too,
It
and
never turned out very good. Yeah,
it
that's
was
back when
a
CB's was
weird. It was always a weird time, and it was like
CB's was always audition night, and it was always like two fucking guys and a dog, and it was probably Hilly's dog, whatever, you know what I mean? It was like pretty shitty, you know what
right.
I mean? Literally and
But
figuratively.
but we had that connection because Hilly was handling Crossfire Choir. Remember
Yeah, but
Crossfire Choir?
that wasn't getting us any favor. I
No, but
think
I mean,
Tom went to that. Tom went to the booker. I forgot what was the booker's name, Joel. Do you remember the woman who booked CB's in the night?
Yeah, Louise.
Louise. He went to Louise and he talked Louise into putting us on. That's how we ended up playing CB's. And I mean, like CB's was a weird place because I
it's
mean,
weird. Yeah,
we played a bunch of gigs with Pleased Youth there, and at the hardcore matinees with Pleased Youth, including a show we did with like the Agnostic Front and Murphy's Law, which was fucking awesome. But like we had never really had any luck, and that's why we always ended up staying close to New Brunswick. We always had these things that always would blow up. I remember one time we played a gig at the Fast Lane in Asbury Park, and
oh yeah,
and this guy was like, I forgot the guy's name. I think he's dead now. Actually, I don't want to talk bad about him by name. But he was like, we booked a gig and he goes, well, you guys got to sell tickets. And then, I was like, sell tickets? What the fuck is this shit? That was my first taste of pay for play, which is
right.
like a shitty policy that they used to do back in the 90s. They started doing it and it went all the way up. The Bone Pony used to do that shit too. That's why we never ended up playing the Pony because of that shit. Because I was never into this pay for play stuff. I like fucking playing real clubs. But we booked this show, and then like a week before the gig, I'm like, listen, We didn't sell any tickets. I'm not selling tickets for this show. If you want to take us off the bill, take us off the bill. No, 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 no. You guys stay on the bill. Don't worry about the tickets. Don't sweat it. It's okay. So, so we're playing with type O negative.
Type O negative, right? Yeah.
Type O negative. This is like the worst fucking bill you can imagine. We have nothing in common with type O negative whatsoever. So, the day before the show, I get a call from this guy and he's like, "Hey man, you got to sell tickets." I'm like, I mean, listen, man, I told you we didn't sell any tickets. I told you we drop off the bill. He goes, "No, man." So he starts sweating me. I'm like, ended up, we played a gig. The guy was like a total dick to us. And it was like, I remember being the fastest loadout in the history of man. I had a double amp setup. We were so fucking loud that night. I made sure I turned it up extra fucking loud that
Oh,
night.
and the sound guy was insisting on punching a hole in my bass drum,
Yeah,
which I
that
did.
was another.
And I'm like, no, no, everybody else hangs the mic right through the top of the bass drum. You can do that too. And he's like, oh man, I want to cut a hole. Like, you're not touching my drums. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
They just had a
the kind
total
of shit,
attitude.
the kind
And
of shit that we dealt with.
I actually used to play that place with Stepper, this band that Bobby loved, a reggae cover band that used to play the chord all the time. And we used to play the shore during the summers, big thing. So we used to play there, and they liked us because we brought people in, because people come to see, cover reggae, all white band except for the bass player. And so that was a different experience, And when you're having people coming in, everybody's happy, and we're stuck with type O negative. Doug made it clear that we weren't selling any tickets, and then he kind of like took it out on us, and we're like, okay, great, see ya, bye.
At the end of that show, me and Tom were like, let's see how fast we can get our shit out of here and get back to the court for a last call, or LC as we used to call it. Because we'd be like, let's get back for LC. Fuck this shit. We got to get back by, we got to get back by 2 so we can fucking get in and do the hang. Because once you're in at last call, we had kind of could stay as late as we wanted to and hang out and do whatever the fuck, we were up to. Have a couple more drinks, a couple more shots, But we had to get back by then, so we had to like. I never unload. I think we were out of that place with the double amp setup and hidden with the SVT. We were out of that place in 10 fucking minutes and on the road. I was like, I'm not even looking back at this gig because that was a total turd, man. And
I'll, t- I'll tell you what, though, honestly, did you ever meet Pete Steele from Typo Negative?
no, he didn't. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but
You would have loved him. Totally, totally the real thing. Funny as hell, no bullshit. I know we had
yeah,
a
I'm sure he is. And I mean, I'm just saying because Typo Negative is like the absolute
right.
different band than us. And I don't even know why we even got on that bill, but I was like, hey, you know what? We're opening for Typo. They're kind of a bigger band. Why not? You know what I mean? It's not that I mean, believe me, people were looking at us like we had two fucking heads on that stage because we had nothing, no, they had nothing in common with Typo Negative, and that crowd was like they're just like, who the fuck are these guys? What the fuck? Let's go have a drink. So, and I mean, back in that day, I mean, I used to take at fast lane. I used to just like before I go to get in the fast lane, I'd go next door to the lanes, man, and have like drinks there because it was cheap as shit. It was back before they even became like a rock club when that dude Mel decided to make that a rock club. And I used to go over there. But I mean, this like that was like that's always like one of those all-time shitty gigs. But then there was a gig like the Bonnie Rocks gig.
Oh, that was great.
You ever hear of Bonnie Rocks,
Down in
Joel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had the fucking chicken wire in front of the fucking, they had a fence in front of around the pit. It was bizarro land, man. That's some straight up fucking wackiness, man. That's like, where was that again? That was Berlin.
Yeah,
Berlin, New
Berlin, New
Jersey,
Jersey.
right?
That's right.
So it was way down South Jersey. We pulled up and we are like, I remember sitting in the car just being like, what the fuck did we get booked into here? But we ended up having a great time and it was funny,
Wait,
Wally's in-laws.
yeah. So my brother-in-law, who's now passed away, was worked in South Philly at the junkyards, and he was connected with that kind of people. And he brought some of his friends in, and so they came in. They said they just had them purchase bottles. They said, we're going to buy bottles, set the bottles up for my guys here. We were supposed to go on like third or second or something like that. And so the bar saw that they were going to make money on these guys sitting around drinking until we went on. So they put us on last. Remember that?
Yeah.
They kept knocking us back.
I was so bummed out.
And so one of the guys that came with my brother-in-law went up to the guy who was managing at the time. He goes, "Hey, my cousin's band wants to go on." He goes, "Hey, what's my cousin's band name again? Wally. What's his band's name?" My cousin Wally with his band Karma wants to go on. And so we went on finally at the end. It was fun. It was a good night, but it was like we were on really late. And my wife was in the pit. She got a black eye in the pit that night.
Yeah, no, it was one of those fucking shows. Because we ended up like playing with this band, Inspector 12, not Inspector 7, Inspector 12. And those guys were like they were a lot of fun. They were
fun.
And they were a really great band. And we ended up bringing them up to New Brunswick. They played New Brunswick with us. That was one of the things that was cool about going out on, and meeting meeting people in other places. Kind of like that, that place was cool. The Loop Lounge was like, the guy who owned the Loop loved us. He loved Bad Karma. And he was like, "Oh, you guys got to come back. Come on, man." And he hooked us up. We ended up hooking up with this band. What the hell was the name of that band? Remember that band that we got, the guy with the tequila? Let's take a shot of tequila. I can't remember the name of the band, but he was like a bouncer in the place, and we ended up hooking him up. It was like because that's what you would do back in the day. You'd get like, you'd barter gigs with other bands. You know what I mean? That's what you did. You'd like, you want to play over here, you got to play here. I'll get you a gig here at the Court Tavern. So, like having that court ace in the hole always helped. You know what I mean? Because that guy also booked us in a place in New York, which ended up being a really good gig too. It was like right on it's not Houston, but what was that street that goes right back to the Holland Tunnel? Can't remember the street, but that's where this club was at. It was a big, big club, and this dude had to hook up for this club, and the place was packed. And
yeah,
that was I just remembered this because I remember me and my buddy Paul Buck were walking around the city, and we were like walking around the piece of San Gennaro because it was like right by there, and we were just like, "This is crazy, man." I mean, holy shit, The feast was right by nearby, and we're just like, it was fucking that was a lot of fun. But you would get these gigs from bartering with other bands. That guy Leroy in that other band, Trainwreck. That was another one that was like, we were always going back and forth with Leroy, who I forgot what his real name was, but I refused to call him Leroy because it's not his real name. But I used to bust his chops, like, that's what you did in New Brunswick. You were ball busters. So I mean, especially if you're at the court, I mean, the court was the kind of place that, anything could happen. I mean, I remember when I started going there and the guys who worked there was a cigarette machine next to the men's room. And if somebody went in the bathroom that they thought was an asshole, they'd push the cigarette machine in front of the bathroom door and then shoot bottle rockets under it. It's like, psh, psh, psh. They would do shit like that. I mean, I remember in the 80s, man, anytime Ronald Reagan came on TV, man, it was like a hail of ice. Everybody in the bar would just start throwing ice at the fucking TV. That's how fucking popular he was at that point in New Brunswick.
And we thought that administration was bad.
Well, let's not get into politics. Let's get off.
No, but part of our thing was that we were reacting to that, and in that time you were writing songs. A lot of the songs related to issues that were very, very much of concern to younger people, especially at the time. And
I mean, like we started right when the first Bush came into power, and we also were around for most of like Clinton, and I mean, Clinton didn't really offend me as much as some of his other stuff, but believe me, I just saw a clip of George W. Bush, and he actually was like warning about what's going on now, and he was like, "You better watch out for these people." And it's funny. It's like, here's the voice of reason.
I know that's unbelievable, right? But yeah,
George W. Bush, he's the voice of reason.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Right.
That guy, last time I checked, he was choking on a pretzel on his couch. So, it's insane,
Yeah.
But anyway, so we always had like kind of a political bent too with this whole thing, you know what I mean? And the funny thing is, like when we started, it seemed like every time we play, the Grateful Dead tickets were going on sale because we were right down the street from Cheap Thrills. So every time we'd be playing, there'd be a line right in front of the court going around, and I'd go out in the street and start yelling at all these people, like Grateful Dead fans, like "Come on inside, welcome to the Tunnel of Love," and I was like totally busting balls. And I mean, that's what we did, I mean, especially when we started. Like I said, I people were scared, man, because I was not like this outwardly friendly fella. I was kind of gruff and, pretty much, tell it like it is and right in your goddamn fucking face where it's,
Which is really funny though, because you're just really the opposite kind of person.
you
You're
know,
caring, good person. You're a sweetheart, man. You really are. But the people in the audience,
where's my halo?
yeah, but the people in the audience just saw it. You
I
had
know.
you had this persona, but you're really, I mean, it's
Yeah, I
funny
know.
because you're describing yourself in that way, but those of us who know you and like you very much know that you're not really like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. That I was a concerned citizen with the things that were going on and, all this stuff that was happening. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's definitely different, I mean, it's a different world now for sure, but we had a definitely political awareness, you know what
Oh
I
yeah.
mean? And I
Land of the
carried that over.
Dumb.
I
Land of
carried
the
that
Dumb.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like those songs. And
Right.
I mean, I think that might be on there too. That was a good one, man. That was one of my favorite songs,
It's on there.
early Bad Karma songs. That was when we really started picking up the pace too, and I think that's what I love about that bootleg. Like, I finally come out with this retrospective, during the pandemic. What a smart idea that was. So there was no way to promote anything. And I mean, I think I sold 4 copies online, and that's about all.
It's a great compilation though.
No, some people bought it. That's why I'm
Yeah.
like, when I'm do this show, I'm bringing a bunch of copies with me.
That's good.
So I'm doing that to make sure everybody, anybody who wants to get a copy can pick it up at a reasonable price. And it's going to have the bootleg in there too. It's going to be a two
Oh,
CD.
good.
It's 2 CDs. So it's two for
Good.
the price of one. So, it's like I love that's one of the best parts about doing that project was just going in and listening to all these. We were very lucky that Kirk Miller, was the sound man at the court and he recorded just about everything. So he had so many things. So I went back to him. I'm like, Kirk, how much Bad Karma stuff do you think you have? And he goes, let me go look. And so he went and pulled out all the Bad Karma stuff and digitized it for me. So
Wow.
that's what's on the bootleg and majority of it. I think he had one thing that we did at a big we did like did a show at the Rose Room at Rutgers, which ended up being a pretty big show. It was like a really, really well attended. And we ended up playing there. And I think he has some stuff that we played at the Rose Room because he was doing sound that day. And that was a really great show. It was a it wasn't rocks against racism. It was rock against it was done by Pedro Serrano actually put it
Yeah.
together. So it was like for, equality and stuff and for, gay rights and stuff. And I think I came out with the witticism of it came up and it was like, everybody has a right to love anybody they want. And if you don't like it, you can suck my dick, which was like went over like a lead balloon at the
Yeah,
crowd, but
right.
that's okay. But that's me. I remember the cops were arresting people outside. It was like fucking nuts, man. It was a wild show, but it was like a lot of fun, man. That was a big New Brunswick. Every band in New Brunswick played that show. And it was a lot of fun, And I mean the Souls played it. There was a lot of big bands on there. Probably Loose played it, I think. They probably were on that bill. Because we all played together. We all played at one point or another parties or that
Yeah.
was one of the great things about New Brunswick is it was just there were so many bands. I mean, I could go on forever saying all the New Brunswick bands. I mean, you had like, you had what was that, 3 to 6 inches. Um, Pro Solar Mechanics, who were ex Vegas, Boss Jim Geddes, who were live, I think was the first name of their band, and then they had to change their name or Real or something. I forgot, it was something else.
The
But they had to
Gripweeds are
change.
still playing around. The Gripweeds are
Grip
still playing.
the
They're
Gripweeds were playing, yeah. They really, they played the court a lot. They always hooked up with them. Whenever Jimmy was, because we were good friends with Jimmy Babjack anyway. Jimmy was always around. I used to go to I used to go to his video store, and Bobby would send me over to the video store. Well, he'd say, here's a six pack. You got 2 cans for you, 2 cans for Jimmy, and 2 cans for Rube the Bum. This guy Rube who used to stand out on the corner and scream and holler at people and like, "Ah, ah, you
Bum
fucking
Shop. Bum
off."
Shop.
Ah. He was the best. He always stuck his tongue out. That was the best, and he was like, and I go, "Hey, Rube, come here. Here, here's some fucking beer." He goes, "Thanks, man. Appreciate that."
He was always hanging out at the bottom of the hill.
Bottom of the hill, the Bum Shop. Which is what
That's
we
right.
wrote that song, The Bum Shop,
Yep.
about like, New Brunswick, and that was that, and the Hub. That was another liquor store and liquor store bar that Wally lived across the street from when he lived on French Street in New Brunswick. And we'd go over there and buy Mickey six pack of Mickey's Big Mouths for practice and go up there and get stewed on like malt liquor and practice. But yeah, I mean, you could hear us clearly out on fucking French Street.
And we used to practice at Doug's mom used to run a motel in Pennsylvania. And we used to go up there to practice. It was
Well,
like incredible.
she ran the motel.
She ran
So
the
there was
motel.
a bunch of cabins, and there was like 4 cabins in each. There was 4 rooms in each cabin. So I'd say, Mom, put us way in the back where there's nobody. You know what I mean? To us in that one in the back,
We
where
sat there and
we're
practiced.
not going to bother anybody, and we could go up there and write music. All I mean, that was the main thing. We really just wanted to write music. And I mean, we probably didn't document enough of it, to be honest with you. I mean, that's why that CD ended up being, kind of important for me to do, is because we never had a real proper release. I always thought that that record that we did put out was not it was too eclectic all the way around, and it lost people's attention. We didn't really have, it wasn't like something easy. There wasn't a genre that you could attach to it.
At the
That was
time, it
always
was
something.
eclectic. It was too eclectic, but now it wouldn't be too eclectic.
No,
Now people
probably
are putting
not.
out a variety of different kinds of approaches to music, maybe on the same product. Back then, the idea was you needed to have everything identified by a certain sound. If you're going to a record company, that's
Your
what they
punk
wanted to
rock,
hear.
your ska, your
Yeah. Well,
grunge.
what's this? Why is this song different than this one? I don't think you should have that on that album. We're like, yeah, but that's what we do. That's what.
No, I mean, like the best example of that is there was this guy in New Brunswick. He's a great guy. He's actually still plays around a lot. This guy Matt Whitty. And he's like, now he plays finger picking guitar and stuff by himself. He does a lot of solo shit. But he had a band called New Blood Revival. And New Blood Revival was a really good band. I mean, they had their own thing, they had their own sound, they were perfect. They got signed by Atlantic, and Atlantic was like, "Yeah, that's not selling what you're doing though. Why don't you do this?" They turned this fucking shit into like metal ska. Like it's like the polar opposite of what this shit was. He had a really good guitar player. This kid Danny, I think that was his name. He had like and an old friend of mine, Brett, played bass on with him, and John Swain played drums. And those guys, I'd known them for years and years, so I was like very happy that they were going somewhere, and they got derailed by this fucking retard at the record company that made them change their whole sound. It flopped. The band fucking folded.
Right.
They probably owe money to fucking Atlantic still.
Yeah, that happens. I had a guest on
That's
Black.
why I never would sign with a major, man. I was never That's why we never really put anything out. I don't think we had a chance to. And if we did, we probably would have blew it by telling them, listen, we're not following your fucking we're doing what we want to do, man. We're not gonna follow your nonsense, you know what I mean? And I'm not gonna sign away my life to go out and do whatever you want us to be. That's why we kind of never really did anything past the point of putting out our own CD.
Right.
And we had so much stuff. We still have other stuff we never put out.
We had a flip side record
Wheels.
though too. We had the pirate song on the flip side record. That was the one thing we did on a record company other than our own
Yeah,
Red
exactly.
Ghost.
That was like they done one of the RAFR comps. That was one of the, that's why we did that show at the court and then at the Continental, because that was all part of the CD release. Actually, if you look back here, let me see if I can see back here and wait, hold on. See back in the corner there?
Yeah, yeah.
There's the record release thing for that.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
like, look at the bill there. It's like Bad Karma, FF, Rick Slave and the Phantoms, Pleasure Fuckers, Nashville Pussy, the Wretched Ones, Turbo ACs. It was a pretty stoked bill, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was
And
good
we
bill.
ended up headlining that show. That's why the next night when we ended up being the opener, I was just like, get the fuck out of here. And ended up like we fucking did real well anyway, so I don't really give a shit. Just
So as far as the music that was put out when you were a band, it was the George Washington record, and then Just the Hell of It was the album,
exactly.
right?
And
And
just for the hell of it, I think just kind of suffered from a bad mastering job. It just the guy was very he ended up being very milquetoast about the way he did it. So when we went back and I ended up later on, I had DATs. I had all the DATs of all those tapes that we did at Ron's. And I took them back to my buddy Tom Ruff, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll master this for you." Tom was a good guy.
Tom's amazing. Do you know Tom Ruff, Joel?
I
You know,
don't, I don't.
a
Yeah,
Grammy-winning guy from New Brunswick. I mean, amazing. All good friend of John Ritchie. Went to school with John Ritchie.
yeah,
He's that generation.
he knew how to master. He was like a Grammy Award winning master. He did like he mastered like the Hank Williams box set. I think he won a Grammy for that. And then he did a few other. He's done a lot of. He did a lot of work for. He worked for Sony for years and years. He worked for Sony.
Great guy.
And he
Great guy.
actually produced the last stuff that we actually did, which is the four songs that we had that we did. That was the only ones we actually ended up mixing out of that batch because that's the only stuff that was from the the two guitar lineup,
Hmm.
the four-piece
Yeah.
Bad Karma lineup, and that would be like Super Negative, Anger, I Hate Love,
Hate love.
and White Trash, which we finally that's the funniest song of all because that was like the song that was the first song that I really that was the song that I wrote in actually I wrote the Suicide song before that, but White Trash was I wrote that song when I was in Pleased Youth and brought it back because I was actually going to play slide in Pleased Youth at that point for that song just to do it, you know. And it ended up being like the Bad Karma, like we were on, that was we had the song on it. I think did we was that on the George Washington
We
record?
did. We did. No, 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 not the George Washington record. That was on the other on the CD, right?
Yeah, it's on the CD. That's on the last CD finally because that's the one that I put out. The one that the Eating the Afterbirth because that's like 30 songs and on top of it all the bootleg stuff of all the stuff that
Yeah.
we never did proper recordings on, which is why that Kirk doing all those recordings were so important. Circling back to Kirk and his shit, because he used to record everything and do a good job of it. That's why I love listening to the bootleg. It brought back so many memories because we had so many songs that we never really did a proper, recording of. I mean, we had all this live stuff and we were pretty good live, so the songs are pretty flawless. The recordings, are because, we were pretty good live, we were a pretty tight band, you know what I mean? It got to the point where, we were like a three-headed monster, and then when we did the four-piece, it was a four-headed monster, except that one of the heads was a little drunker than the other ones, which would be Mick.
Let
The
me uh, let me
nugget.
let me divert for a second here because as I said to you guys before we started recording, the link for the Zoom that we're doing now fell off a truck and into a couple of different inboxes. And I was hoping to get a couple surprise guests. One in particular, unfortunately, can't come on, but he's been messaging me as you guys have been talking. That's Mr. Atkins.
Oh,
Ah,
nice.
So he sent me something. He wrote out a little quick something. So
Yeah.
um, let me read this to you guys. Um, this period of my life was so important. Battling through my exit from pill to find something new and different. Brian Brain sometimes and Lunar Bear others let me go bonkers on the kit and expose me to a more thoughtful world. not just Lunar and Tom and Sluggo and Wally, but Elliot Katz and the Court Tavern and a Melody Bar and Matt Pinfield and William Tucker too. Please tell everyone I send my love.
Oh man, that's
Oh, that's great. Send it back.
right
Definitely.
back at you, brother. That was an experience and a half playing with him, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
amazing.
I was a big Pill fan, and I mean a huge Pill, and I saw him play with Pill probably about 4 or 5 times, and I mean I was always to look over and he's playing the fucking drums. It was just like,
Yeah,
how the
amazing.
fuck did I end up in this? Holy shit, it's just so bizarre. And I mean, his foot literally is like it's
Yeah,
like you couldn't hit that hard with your fucking hand.
I know.
I know he's an amazing drummer though.
I've played alongside that guy. It
You
just
know, he's something else, man. I mean,
Plus, his personal energy was always so positive, and so he never said bad things to people. He would get angry at certain things, but he would never. He was always really cool with people and made everybody feel welcome. The musicians he played with, he's always kind. In the pig face environment, he would be inclusive of whoever wanted to play, and in a way that was just really, unique, very unique and wonderful. But
yeah.
anyway, so we've all experienced that together, and so that's part of our story is sharing with people like him. You're coming along to this interview with us. You have that connection too. I mean, we don't often have an opportunity to talk about these things with people who didn't experience it. So it'd be nice for people to know a little bit about a world that can exist among artists, in a community that they call a community now. I don't know what we called it back then, but we were just all kind of friends and it was cool, good part
Yeah.
of life.
I mean, there are people I do projects with all over the world. Literally, I've got an EP coming out in about a month. It's an 11-person band with 4 drummers, and 6 of those people were from the Martin orbit. That's
Oh, wow.
and then like
Yeah.
I've got a guy in Norway submitting stuff, and it all came through that Chicago filter, that Invisible Records filter. And that's what's cool about it. You meet like 30 people at a show that Martin coordinates or a tour, and then like 5 of those people go off and do their own thing, and then these guys will section off and do something, so but what's the common denominator? So he definitely is carrying on that vibe, and
Yeah.
definitely with Lunar Bear being in a lot of ways kind of ground zero for what became that greater, let's bring people in and see what happens kind of thing. So, and that still carries on. So yeah, he chimed in with that, so I want to make sure I read it on the air.
it's cool.
Cool.
Um, so what led to you guys deciding to be a 4-piece more towards the end and bringing Mick involved?
It's hard to say how that actually happened. I think because I knew Mick and I had always wanted to have a second guitar player in the band. And the thing was that Mick's playing is a lot like my playing in a lot of ways. He's a very similar guitar player, and I just thought it would be pretty, I thought he'd be able to integrate into it better than mostly anybody else that I had tried to actually look at it because I knew he could get a good goddamn guitar sound. And I have to play games with him, you know what I mean? He knew how to get a good guitar sound, and I mean the fact that he worked for what the hell was the name of that company? He worked for a backline company out of Philly for a long time. He worked at this place, something staging, central staging or something. But he would be like, I remember we played a gig at the Saint. I had gotten a gig because I got the gig because the guy Scott, anyway, this guy Scott at the Saint was like, "Hey man, can you get me Nashville Pussy?" And I was like, "Listen, I'll get you Nashville Pussy, but we got to be on the show and we got to get a couple bucks for it too." He goes, "Oh, I'll do that, no problem." So, we ended up showing up there and he went to the fucking warehouse and he grabbed 2 SVTs, like fucking 2 Marshall stacks, And we fucking set that shit up. We were so fucking loud. I mean, you could hear us literally at the boardwalk from the Saint. That's how fucking loud we were. We were loud. And I mean, and that was like the funny thing is like, and then afterwards, I remember trying to like, where's Scott at? Where's Scott at? Where's Scott at? He disappeared. Couldn't get any money out of him. This classic Scott Stamper fucking moment. Oh yeah, no, that's the one and only time we played the Saint with Bad Karma was that gig, and I mean, yeah, Asbury was always one of those places. I mean, we ended up playing the gig at the Lanes that Bruce Springsteen showed up to because my friend of mine Judy she was having her birthday party, and she was like, "Come on, man, you guys got to play my birthday party," and I ended up getting Wally to come up and we all came, we all got together and we played this gig. And then sure enough, there's Bruce Springsteen sitting in the crowd, man, drinking a soda, man. And he was the nicest guy. And I always was kind of like one of those assholes. It was like, yeah, if he's for the working man, how come they call him the boss, huh? And I was like kind of being a dick. I always was a dick about it, but I had a different opinion of him after that night.
Hey, and all the bands got paid for like unbelievably. We all got like $100 or something, which was unthinkable at
And
that
the
time.
only reason they got paid was because Cliff put on the show, Cliff and Judy, because
Cliff and Judy.
Cliff was Judy's husband, and he booked a gig for Judy's birthday, and made sure that the bands all got paid. We actually got $200. I think we got a
What? You said it was no.
I think you got $100. I think we all got $100. That's what you're
That
thinking.
was really it
It's
was
probably what it might have been 300. It's probably more like 300. Probably got $100 a piece. But we had it was and he sat and he watched the whole fucking show. He didn't.
yeah. He hung out the whole time, and
He showed
everybody
up.
knew not to mess with them. Don't go up and say whoa, you know. And he just hung with his crew and watched the bands. It was great.
Yeah, I did say one thing that was kind of fucking annoying, but that's it. I was basically like, here's a song by somebody who should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then we went into Rumble by Link Ray.
Oh,
Ah,
Link Ray, yeah.
We used to always start our shows off with Rumble, before it actually became this fucking, before Rumble was actually a known song by everybody and their mother. Because I think, once it started being in every movie had Rumble in it, you know what I mean? And me and Tom
And
were,
and we're actually opening with Rumble at the show at the in New
and
Jersey,
we
right?
did. And that's why we did that. And, but that end of he hung out the whole show. And it was a really good show too. And I was like, I like the Lanes. The Lanes was like when Jen Hampton used to run it was like really, really pretty nice. She always took care of us. She was always a good person. And, the Lanes was like kind of like especially when the court went away. The Lanes was my go-to. I used to go to I used to book gigs at the Lanes, particularly when we did the Mr. Payday shit afterwards. Once, like, yeah, I think there was a good, 10 years between Bad Karma and Mr. Payday starting up. So, and then after that, that's when I started we started doing the Mr. Payday stuff, and we got to play the fucking Lanes a bunch of times too there because of her. She was always good, and then when she left, and the Lanes became this thing that wasn't the Lanes. It really wasn't the Lanes anymore. The Lanes was like I don't know. It's just for me, it's not the same. It's like that. I used to think of that as the same thing as the court. Like, come on, kids, let's put on a show. You
mm.
know what I mean? And they used to do show. They did good shows there, and she really did a good job booking that club. And it's a shame that that went down. It's another club that like hit the ground, and that was it. It's like kind of like the Brighton, man. We used to play the Brighton all the time, and I mean, yeah, I have fond memories of Brighton, even though they weren't always fond memories. Like Jacko would be like, "Come on, can you guys play tomorrow night?" And he'd have us filling in, and he'd give us $30. We never made more than $30 on any given night, anytime we played there. It was always here's $30. Here's $30. Here's $30. Here's $30. We had a song. It is on the bootleg. It's called the Ashtray Club that I wrote about the Brighton. Because I remember that it's like, look out from the stage. What do you see? Two guys and a dog, an empty ashtray staring at me. Because that's what it was. It was like nobody there. We get suckered into coming down here to just like to
Yeah.
help Jack out, you know.
And you weren't allowed to move your equipment till the very end. So everybody had to stay there and drink until the end of the day. You couldn't move your shit out, you know.
Yeah, no,
I was pissed. I was like,
that was why we finally had to, I think that's why we finally pulled the plug on Jack. I was like, you know, Jack, we're not playing here anymore. I can't be putting up. I'll stay I'll stay at the court, you know,
I'll tell you,
where I know I'm going to get A, I'm going to get paid, and B, I'm going to get the drinks. You know what I mean? We got free drinks and got paid. So that's a winning combination. When you're in a band, you know, you tend to go where you want, where you know you're going to do well. And I mean, after a while, we kind of just, we were like the house band at the court for years and years. And I mean, you know, and there was lots of, you know, it was a great scene at that time. There were
yeah,
so many bands, so many bands. I mean, if I had a list, I'd read them all off. I tried to do it before and then I got caught up with something else. So, you know, and then there was Buzzkill. Like they were like, you know,
that's cool. Great
those
band.
guys were, you know, those
Great
guys
guys.
were always, you know, they were always playing, you know what I mean? You know, and then Mars Needs Women
yeah,
and, you know, and Lamos, they were always there, you know what I mean? There was always bands, the Urchins, you know, there was always bands that were like, you know, that we were always friendly with that would be playing and we always
Yeah.
were pretty happy, you know what I mean? It was a good deal, you know, all around, you know, and it was a great time, you know. I mean, I never could understand how that scene never got as much attention as they should have, but I guess there was no cohesive statement coming out of there because every band was different and you couldn't pin the tail on the donkey. You weren't like, you know, it wasn't like Seattle where you had all these bands that were like-minded bands, you know what I mean? Every band was different. You had bands like, you know, like New Breed, who was like, you know, completely out of left field, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And they were a great band. And I mean, there
Oh,
was
yeah.
just lots of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they had the Smithereens that would play there. I mean, there was some good bands that came. I mean, there were a lot of good bands. I mean, there were bands that were successful that came through too.
And Newt Swirl is another one.
Nude
yeah.
Swirl.
Newt Swirl had their big moment and then kind of just it imploded, man. It's a shame. That's another one where they, you know, they had to deal with Megaforce, you know what I mean? And they were kind of getting somewhere. You know, I guess Johnny Z was like doing some deals with them, and he wanted to break into that. He wanted to break into that alternative market, and that's why he got into with Newt Swirl. And then he was like, "What the fuck am I doing alternative?" So,
And there
you
were some
know,
very different people there, like Bobby Ebbs
he
and
still had because I think it was that dude from the Stormtroopers of Death. What was that dude's name?
Billy Milano.
Billy Milano.
you
From from what the fuck was that band he was in before that? He was in like some skinhead band that were terrible.
The Psychos.
The Psychos, exactly, the Psychos. And he was like, fuck these jerk offs, Nude Swirl, fucking assholes. You know, he wanted to, he was like, why you booking these fucking fags? You know what I mean? He was like, he hated Nude Swirl. And I guess he finally got in Johnny's ear enough that Johnny was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Let's stick with the metal shit.
remember, and Fat Fuck, the band Fat Fuck, they were fantastic.
FF, man. FF was
FF,
fabulous. They
great
were a
band.
great band, you know.
Here's another band from that era that I played a ton with at the Brighton Bar actually, because I had a band that was kind of shore based. I was always up north, but the rest of the band was down there. And we played a ton of shows with the Mad Daddies.
Oh, the Mad Daddies were great. Oh yeah.
Freddie,
Yeah, Mad
best
Daddies. I
guitar
don't even
ever.
know
Oh
how to
man.
slip out of that one, but Jesus Christ, I mean, Freddie was a fucking character, man. And I mean,
Yeah, they were great.
I roadied for them a bunch of times. I remember roadieing for them at Hitsville in Passaic. And that place was like, it was like all these punk rock dudes in there where we didn't want anything to do with these motherfuckers. And Freddie just laid into him and just fucking, he like, when
It was
at one
great.
point he grabbed some guy's girlfriend and like stuck his head under her hoop skirt. And he was just like, and then the guy punched him in the eye and he got back up and he fucking finished the song. And fucking punk rock guys were like, yeah, he's okay.
Well, I remember the band I was in at the time. This is like early 2000s. We played with the Mad Daddies, and Freddie watched our set. Then, unbeknownst to us, he actually went and bought a T-shirt of ours. Had we known, we would have just given him one, you know.
Yeah,
But he
that's
actually
that kind of
buys a
guy.
shirt, and then he wears it during their set. I mean, talk about a warm welcome from somebody who, didn't have to do any of that.
He was a good guy, man. And
Yeah,
I
really
that broke
nice.
my heart. It broke my heart when he died, man. It was a very bad day for New Brunswick in general because Freddie was like a big part of New Brunswick. You know what I mean? The daddies were through. He played through all these different iterations, man, and actually the last one he did, was playing bass with him and Ira Spinrad from Barbecue Bob.
Oh yeah.
He was doing a blues band, and they had he had those guys backing him up, and and then he got sick, and then he was done, man. He was gone, and it's a really a shame, man. I mean, the daddies were like, it's some of my fondest memories of those gigs, those
Yeah.
daddies gigs. They were always a lot of fun.
Yeah, they really were. And always nice guys, just like good people you'd want to hang with.
I'm sorry I keep you on it. I'm exhausted. I don't know.
They were
I
great.
got up too early. The dogs woke me up today.
Well, I
I'm
won't
very
keep you
exhausted.
much longer, but I did want to kind of bring people up to speed because, Doug, like I said, you've been on before, so we did the whole sort of post bad karma thing. But
Yeah.
Wally, how about you? I know you did some work overseas.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So my career has been doing work overseas a lot, and I lived in Havana, Cuba for a while. I played there. I played with some really good musicians there, and had a couple of venues closed down by the government because they didn't like the idea of Cuban musicians playing with the this American guy who was stationed down there. But fantastic experience. Cuban musicians, one of the only countries in the world where musicians get a salary from the government, like anybody else, like a doctor, like anybody, it's not much money, but it was, they get paid to play, and that's all they get paid to do. And then I played and so that was exciting and really exciting. And I played with some guys from Irakere, which is a big band in Cuba, and just wonderful experience playing with them. And I also played when I was I was in Brussels for a few years, and I played with one guy who was an American there's a rap artist, and I did some work with him. I also played with this cover band, which very successful. It's like unbelievable. We were playing all over Europe, and it was a mixture of guys from. Well, I was the only American in the band, but they had one guy from Scotland, one guy from England, two guys from Brussels, and a third guy from Ireland. And people just, they really love music there, and they pay you. Like we used to get like 500 euros a gig for playing cover music, and so that was really great. And we played the last Fourth of July party at the embassy. We got that gig, and we played for the first time overseas the Hendrix version of the Star Spangled Banner for the Fourth of July. The
Wow.
first time that an embassy would allow that to happen. And the guy who played it was nervous as hell. He was the Brit guitarist, right? And he's like, "What if I fuck this up?" And and all these young Marines had never heard it before, and they all came up with this. What was that? The 18-year-old kids. And so that was really exciting. But it was a cover kind of experience. The other experience was playing with my friend Sean Beddoes, who records, and he's got stuff on YouTube. He does like mostly rap kind of things. He goes by Bruised Willis, another Jersey guy. But he so anyway, so that's those are the kind of things I was doing overseas. And but the Cuba thing was fantastic because it was really the musicians there are amazing, but to express yourself musically is always a danger for them, and they have to be really careful what they do and what they do and they say. And they used to have me come on and play "Smoke on the Water," and this one band would call me up to play "Smoke on the Water," right? And they'd go, "The American drummer, come up!" And I would come up, like.
Uh,
But so those are my experiences overseas, I have to say that but my bad karma days will always be the foundational music experience, I think, of my life, just because working with Doug and Tom and, really, really working hard and touring and doing stuff that was, really soulful. It meant a lot to us and meant a lot to the people we were playing with. As you know, I mean, you people that really mean things to you, and we were just talking about people who have passed, and there's a number of them. So I'm very pleased that we're alive and playing, and that we're going to get this shot to this gig on the 16th of May. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's May 16th at Randy Now's Man Cave in Hightstown. In the video description, there'll be a link, probably a few links, but certainly to the music of Bad Karma on Bandcamp. People can check that out and listen to it. There's also all the great Lunar Bear Ensemble stuff, which I'll put up as well. So it's nice to have another chapter as I, try to unfold and tell this greater New Jersey history, particularly of New Brunswick. I've had quite a few people on at this point, Cliff and Ivy. Lunar's been on, Martin, of course, a few other people along the way, some of the Pleased Youth guys, certainly. So, it's really cool to have you back as a band, number one, and really cool that you guys found the time to come on and chat with me and share some history. And yeah, if people are new to the band, like I said, if check it out. If you can make it down to the show, definitely do so. It's been a while since these guys have played together. So come check that out. If not, there'll be links to check out the music. You can at least, get into the band that way. And I'm sure I'm going to be seeing you on the 16th for sure. But I'm sure our paths will cross other ways. There's a certain magnet who currently lives in Chicago who has a tendency of pulling people back and forth. So who knows what's going to happen. But until that does, pleasure having you both. And thank you again,
Thank you.
Tom, for coming on, Martin, for chiming in with a few words. And I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks again, Joel.
Thank you so much, Joel. Couldn't have a better interviewer with your
Oh,
background. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much.